Last month, my girlfriend and I decided to take a trip to visit her family. After searching various travel sites, we decided the best and cheapest way would be to take an overnight train to Boston. There was a train that left Washington, D.C. at 8:32 p.m. and arrived in Boston at 5:17 a.m. from an off-brand railway called Quick Track. The entire trip would cost us $120, which was dirt cheap. It turned out to be the worst decision of our lives. The station was desolate as we waited for the train. There were just 3 other people on the platform, a middle-aged couple and an old guy reading a book. And then a whistle pierced the silence, low and smooth. Bright headlights rounded the corner, twinkling in the darkness, and then the train was rolling up to the platform. "Good evening," a man in a conductor's uniform said as we hobbled up to the train, dragging our suitcases. The old man and middle-aged couple boarded as well, a few cars down. We stepped in, and that's when I realized that I had been completely misled. The train looked nothing like the photos online. The blue cloth seats were faded and dusty. The yellowish lights were flickering in a maddening, syncopated rhythm that made my eyes twitch. The windows were dirty, covered in fingerprint smudges, and off-key elevator music piped through the speakers. This was going to be the trip from hell. "Where do you want to sit?" Amanda asked, looking around the empty train car. I guess that was the one upside. The train car that we were in was completely empty. I had been on crowded trains before, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. It wasn't just the lack of personal space, it was the awkwardness of sitting so close to a stranger, wondering if you were being rude by ignoring them, wondering if you were supposed to fill the silence with small talk. "Well, I guess here's good," I said, motioning to a row of seats near us. We sat down, and I was again reminded what a bad decision I had made. The seats across the aisle from us looked like they were stained with coffee or some other dark liquid. The entire train car had that fake, perfumey odor of cheap air fresheners. Somebody probably sprayed it everywhere to cover up how much the train stank from years of not being cleaned properly. Gross. As we got settled, the elevator music quieted and a man's voice came over the speakers. It sounded like a recording from how polished and smooth the voice was. "Thank you for choosing Quick Track. We're thrilled to have you on board. To ensure a safe, relaxing trip, please make sure to follow our rules. You can also find them in the seat back pockets for your convenience. Rule 1. Passengers are expected to stay seated for the trip unless they're using the bathroom or buying a snack in the cafe cart. Quick Track is not liable for any injuries you sustain while riding. Rule 2. Cart number 8 is the designated quiet cart. Do not talk, whisper, or consume food in this car. Absolute silence must be maintained at all times. Rule 3. Do not enter car number 12, the last car, for any reason. Rule 4. There is no station called Crystal River Station. If the intercom announces a stop there, close your eyes until the train has passed it. If anyone on boards at this station, immediately move to a different train car. Rule 5. You may see a woman wearing a long blue dress in your car with dark hair and a lot of jewelry. Do not approach this passenger in any way. Do not talk to her, and if she talks to you, ignore her. Do not under any circumstances leave your seat to get away from her. She will eventually leave. Rule 6. Pay close attention to the scenery outside your window. If it does not physically match up with the terrain that you should be seeing according to the map, cover up your window. Rule 7. Depending on your route, you may make a stop at Smithson Junction. Do not get off the train at this station for any reason. This is a service stop and there's no way to safely off-board. Rule 8. When the conductor comes by to scan your ticket, make sure that he's wearing a red and purple badge with our logo. If he isn't, do not show him your ticket. Do not answer his questions, do not look at him, and do not let him know your final destination for any reason. Rule 9. Do not get off the train at any station other than the one printed on your ticket. Thank you for your attention. Following these rules will help ensure that you have a fun, safe, and relaxing trip on Quick Track. Enjoy your stay." Amanda and I stared at each other. "Well, that was weird," she said. "Really weird," I agreed. If there's some creepy woman who keeps riding the train or a creepy guy impersonating the conductor, why don't they get the police involved? Hey, maybe they already have. Maybe the police didn't help them. And do you think we're safe? There are lots of other people on this train. We should be fine. I hugged her close. Besides, you got me to protect you. I guess, she said doubtfully. Well, that certainly didn't boost my confidence. Soon, however, we forgot all about the weirdness of the rules. We had an 8-hour train ride ahead of us, and there were a million things on my mind. I was worried that Amanda's parents wouldn't like me. Apparently, they were the fussy, proper types. I had been smart enough to trim my beard and make myself look less like a wild lumberjack mountain man, but I was definitely not the type of guy that they had been envisioning for their daughter. I guess it was an even trade. My parents didn't like Amanda either, for ridiculous reasons like the tattoo on her arm. It was small text that read, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Still, I was hoping for someone to approve of us, and maybe if I knocked it out of the park this week, her parents would like me. A lot of pressure there. Amanda didn't seem to be having the best time either. The dry air in the cabin gave her a bloody nose, and she spent the first 20 minutes of the trip stuffing tissues up her nostrils. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, as she walked bloody tissues over to the trash can at the back of the car. "This is so gross." I felt bad for Amanda. She had clearly grown up in a culture where normal bodily functions of women were frowned upon. When we both came down with a cold a few weeks ago, every nose blow was followed by an apology. "Do you want to watch something?" Amanda asked, once her nose had stopped bleeding. "Sure." And then things suddenly got better. Since we were the only ones in the car, I wrapped my arms around her and I gave her a kiss. She snuggled her head against my shoulder. We picked a movie and turned the volume all the way up on our laptop. For a while, it was like our own private movie theater, rocketing through the darkness at 100 miles per hour. And then I heard someone cough behind us. My brain barely even registered it at first. It was a natural sound, something that you would expect to hear in a train around people. But of course, it wasn't natural, because the train car was empty. I glanced back. My heart dropped. There was someone sitting several rows behind us. I couldn't see much of them, just the top of a head with dark hair poking out above the rows of seats. I nudged Amanda. "There's someone behind us," I whispered. "What, really?" She glanced back and then poked her head a little into the aisle to get a better look. "Did you hear them come in?" I asked. "No." We had had the volume up high on the laptop, that was true. Still, the doors that led between the train car and the vestibule were loud. They made a very recognizable rattling sound, and I think that I would have heard it over the movie. I hadn't heard any footsteps either, or the rolling of a suitcase. Besides, the train hadn't stopped anywhere since we had gotten on. Maybe this person was just switching seats, or coming back from the cafe car. Still, it was weird. Amanda turned the volume down on the laptop and we continued watching the movie. I threaded my arm out from around her shoulders. This wasn't our own private movie theater anymore. About 20 minutes later, I heard something else, the soft sound of a zipper being pulled. Reflexively, I glanced back and my heart started to pound. The person was now only 2 rows behind us. I nudged Amanda silently and pointed. She glanced back and looked at me with wide eyes. "What are they doing?" she whispered. "I don't know." I leaned over Amanda, who was in the aisle seat, so I could get a better look. I couldn't see much. An arm, a shoulder, and a long lock of dark hair. I couldn't see her face. Her shoulder was clad in a light blue sleeve, and there were several bangle-style bracelets around her wrist, including one that was designed to look like a thin gold snake. I hadn't heard her move closer to us. I guess she just decided to move seats for some reason, I told Amanda. But inside, my stomach was twisting. This felt wrong. How could she come into the train car silently? Why would she move closer to us? "Wait a minute, the rules," Amanda whispered. "Didn't they say that a creepy woman would be wearing a blue dress and a lot of jewelry?" "Oh yeah." I reached into the seat back pocket and pulled out the flyer that read, "Quick Track Safety Rules" on it. "There, Rule 5, I said, pointing. It says that we should just ignore her. Maybe we should move to a different car where there are other people. No, the rules said not to do that. Why the hell not? Amanda hissed, exasperated. I don't know, maybe that'll antagonize her, I replied. It made sense. If she were some weirdo, she might like scaring us. Running away from her might like be running away from a bear, alerting her senses to the thrill of the chase. The rules said to ignore her, and so that's what we did. Amanda and I continued to watch the movie. I ignored the faint sounds that I heard behind us. A cough, a zipper pull, a soft click. I ignored everything. At one point, I thought that I felt a puff of warm air on my arm, through the gap between the seats, but I shut my eyes tight and I told myself to ignore it. About a half hour later, the ambient sounds had stopped. Holding my breath, I glanced back. The woman was gone. Relief flooded me. I didn't realize how much tension I had been holding until that moment. My muscles relaxed and I settled further into the chair. When the movie ended, Amanda and I decided to try to go to sleep. She pulled out her neck pillow and closed her eyes, and with 10 minutes, she was out. I, however, couldn't fall asleep. I gave up and I looked out the window. Across the tracks, I could see a neighborhood, a curvy, narrow street lined with cookie-cutter houses, with glowing yellow windows and wraparound porches. From the train, it looked like one of those toy Christmas villages, where LED lights twinkle in the windows and ice skaters go round and round a pond made of glass. Gold lights spilled out from miniature street lamps, illuminating a couple walking their dog. A car pulled into a driveway, taillights glowing red. And wait. There was someone standing in the cul-de-sac, illuminated by the red glow of the taillights, watching us go by. Before I could get a closer look, the entire scene was gone, a dark strip of forest in its place. Well, that was weird. A few minutes later, the forest gave way to civilization again, and another town passed us in miniature. These houses were further apart, lining the serpentine roads that curved over the hills. One street ran parallel to the tracks, and I watched a bicyclist zoom down the road, lit by the yellow glow of these sodium lamps. And then my heart plummeted. There was another person standing in the middle of the street, staring at us. My stomach did a flip. Why were these people staring at the train as it went by? If they live next to a railroad, they must be used to trains passing all the time then, right? And it was so late out. I checked my phone and it was after 10. It was a Friday night, but still, it didn't make sense. I saw the glow of more streets and houses approaching over the hills and my heart began to pound. I didn't want to look out and see another person staring at us, but at the same time, I couldn't tear my eyes away. As we passed, my heart fell to the floor. There were 3 people all standing on the street, staring at the train as it went by. They were pointing at us. I could only see their silhouettes, and then the train took a hard right turn. Residential streets were replaced by dark forest again. Although it almost looked too dark out, I could barely make out the shapes of the trees. I could no longer see the full moon. Were we in a tunnel? I didn't think so, but it was so impenetrably dark. I could only see the reflection of my face, sallow under the yellow lights of the train, eyes wide and mouth hanging open. The train veered right again and I jostled in my seat, and then the moon peeked out from behind the trees, and we were crossing a deep, dark body of water. Water extended in every direction as far as the eye could see. We were on some sort of bridge, but it seemed to only be a few feet above the water. Maybe it wasn't even a bridge, but an easement or a dam or something, just barely poking out of the water. It looked like a heavy rain could flood the tracks and sweep us under. I swallowed. One of my biggest fears was driving off a bridge and plummeting into the water, trying to desperately escape before the car sank. I suddenly imagined the train derailing, our car filling up with water, Amanda and me pounding on the windows. I tried to swallow those thoughts as best as I could. They have engineers and stuff who test for those things. They don't want to get sued. If it wasn't safe, they wouldn't let us ride it. But as I sat there staring at the water extending out in every direction, the silver moon reflected in the waves, I realized something. There isn't some huge lake here. We had been on the train about 2 hours. We should have been in these suburbs of Philadelphia, not crossing an enormous lake. I pulled out my phone. I was right, the little blue dot on the map marking our location put us in these suburbs of Philly, not in the middle of a lake. I panned the view around, but I didn't see any bodies of water nearby. I switched between satellite and schematic view over and over, but neither showed anything resembling the lake that we were crossing. The rules, they said, if what we see out the windows doesn't match, we need to cover the windows. Oh no, had I already broken the rules by staring out at the water so long? I grabbed my sweatshirt and stretched it over the window. I kept falling down, but then I realized that I could tie it to the luggage rack above us. After a few minutes of MacGyvering the thing, I finally made a makeshift shade in front of the window. I felt nauseous, overheated, and motion sick all at once. My entire body was tensed up like I was expecting something to jump out at me at any moment. I sat there in a horrible silence for a few minutes, staring at the sweatshirt swaying with the motion of the train. And then the intercom rumbled to life. "Philadelphia, 30th Street Station," a man's voice said over the speakers. I picked up a corner of the sweatshirt and peered out the window. To my relief, I saw the sprawling urban decay of Philadelphia. Stained buildings, bright lights, and several train tracks all converging ahead into the station. I yanked the sweatshirt down and pulled my phone out to double-check our location matched. Sure enough, it showed us at the 30th Street Station. The train car jostled and Amanda startled awake. "Where are we?" she asked groggily. "Philadelphia." "Only Philly," she groaned. "Ugh." We rolled into the station. The platform sat underneath the station building halfway underground. Artificial lighting shone down, illuminating the few people waiting to board. A young couple like us and an older man carrying a large duffel bag. The brakes squealed to a stop. Should we just get off the train, I thought, looking out at the platform. There was less than an inch of glass between us and this stained, creepy car in the normal world. We could get a room and another train ticket tomorrow. Two things kept me seated. First, we didn't have enough money to pay for a room and another train ticket. Second, the rules clearly stated that we could only get off the train at the location printed on our tickets. Following the rules had kept us safe so far. 6 more hours. I held my breath as the train rumbled back into motion. We snaked out of the underground station and out into the moonlight. I watched the buildings of Philadelphia scroll by, disappearing behind us into the darkness, and then I heard the car doors rattle open. At first, I felt relief. One of the people who boarded is coming into our car. We won't be alone anymore. But when I looked up, I saw that it was the conductor making his way down the aisle. I reached for my phone to show him our ticket and then stopped. There was something off about him. He was walking so slowly and I could barely see his eyes under the shadow of his hat. He paced closer, each footstep lightly thumping on the tile. I quickly glanced at his chest but didn't see the red and purple quick-track pen. "Don't look at him," I whispered to Amanda. "I don't think that's the real conductor." "Should we get up?" she whispered back. "Go to a different car." I nodded. The other cars would have other passengers, witnesses, and the rules didn't explicitly forbid running from the fake conductor like they did the woman in the blue dress. I squeezed Amanda's hand. "Come on, let's go." We stood at the same time staring at the floor, careful to not even glance at the man. I stopped dead. Blocking our path was a pair of black men's shoes. The fake conductor was already here, standing right in front of our seats, blocking our way. "Tickets, please," he rumbled in a low voice. I kept my eyes on the floor. Should we push past him? The rules said don't look at him. They didn't say don't touch him. Don't make physical contact with him. I frantically weighed the options in my head. "Tickets, please," the man said again, his voice impatient. Amanda gripped my hand so tight that I could feel pins and needles creeping over my fingers. And then suddenly, she yanked me forward. We stumbled past the conductor, his body bumped against mine, and a shudder of revulsion went through me. And then we were out in the aisle, and we both broke into a run towards the front of the car. The doors opened, and then we were in the near darkness of the vestibule, the metal floor jostling underneath us. I wanted to look back to see if he had followed us, but I didn't dare. The rules said not to look at him, and I wouldn't look. We made it to the next train car. Relief flooded me as I saw it wasn't empty. There was somebody sitting up by the front. Amanda and I collapsed into our seats, hearts pounding wildly. "I don't think he followed us," I said. "I don't hear anything." "Yeah, me neither." The two of us sat there panting, trying to calm down. Maybe we should get off at the next stop," she said. "The rules said that we can't. And who even knows if the rules are meant to keep us safe? Maybe whoever wrote them wants to trap us here." Chills ran down my spine. I hadn't considered that. "Okay, maybe," I said finally. We fell into a tense silence, filled with the mechanical hum of the wheels underneath us. I stared straight ahead. This entire trip was probably the weirdest thing that had ever happened to me. Part of me didn't even believe it. It felt like some sort of weird dream. The weird passenger woman and the fake conductor could be explained, but the lake that we had passed over when we were supposed to be in the suburbs, I couldn't. I hadn't told Amanda about that. I didn't really want to. I stared straight ahead, trying to process everything, trying to figure out what would be the safest move. And then I noticed it. The person several rows in front of us. I could see the top of their head, but right above the seat back, there was a strip of something pale. Their forehead. Was the person sitting there facing us? As I stared at them, they began to move. The head slowly inched up. It was a forehead, and then two dark eyes staring at us. Every muscle in my body froze. I grabbed Amanda's arm and pointed. She gasped, eyes wide. As the person stared at us, their hands reached up to grip the seat back, and I noticed several gold bangles on their wrist. It was the woman, the passenger that we were supposed to ignore. "Run," I whispered. We got up and leapt into the aisle, turning towards the car that we came from. But no, the fake conductor, he was right there, curled up on the seats right beside us, waiting for us, hiding from us. He had a horrible grin on his face. We turned on our heels and ran the other way. I could hear his footsteps right behind us, getting closer and closer. I could see the woman in the blue dress, sidestepping to intercept us, a smile on her face. I averted my eyes, focusing on running as fast as I possibly could. I made it to the front of the car. The doors rattled open. Amanda was only a few steps behind me. She ran in just a moment before the door rattled shut behind us. Without a word, we stumbled through the tilting, jostling vestibule and made our way to the next train car. To my enormous relief, there were several people in this car. "Help!" I shouted. There are people back there chasing us." But my voice died in my throat as I saw the sign hanging from the ceiling. Quiet car. The rules said absolute silence was required in the quiet car. The dozen or so passengers stayed still in their seats. They didn't turn around. I took a tentative step forward. Amanda followed me hesitantly. Maybe it was okay. Maybe they didn't care that we had made noise. Maybe the weird woman and the fake conductor wouldn't follow us. Maybe everything was fine. I repeated this lie again and again in my head. We passed the first row of benches. There was an old woman sitting at the window seat, but she wasn't reading or anything. She was staring at the seat in front of her. I averted my eyes and continued forcing myself down the aisle. A scuffing sound came from behind us. I whipped around to see movement in the vestibule window. It was too fast for me to catch whether it was the woman or the conductor, but either way, the door didn't open. For some reason, they weren't following us. I turned back around and my heart fell through the floor. All the passengers in front of us were now leaned into the aisle staring at us, but there was something horribly wrong with them. Their skin and hair had a grayish tint to it, like all their color had been desaturated. Their eyes were the only thing brightly colored. They were severely bloodshot, bright red veins popping through the white. They didn't move. They just stared at us, still as statues. I glanced back and froze. The old woman behind us was now leaning into the aisle too. Her head was only about a foot from my body and her face tilted up to look at me. Her skin was grayish and pale and thick red veins branched through her eyes. The woman and the fake conductor still weren't following. Were they even afraid of these things? When I finally wrenched my eyes from the woman behind me, all the people in the quiet car had moved again. Each one had a finger pressed against their lips as if shushing us. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The train rocketed through the darkness, gently swaying. The lights flickered overhead, casting the strange faces in relief, their features exaggerated and twisted. They stared at us, still as statues, hair slightly swaying with the movement of the train. And then we ran. I felt hands clawing at us, trying to drag us back, but I didn't dare look down. I focused all my energy on running, on keeping Amanda's hand locked tightly in mine. For a moment she let go and I thought that I had lost her, but then I felt her hand in mine again, and that was the motivation that I needed to push myself faster and harder. My legs were burning, my heart was beating painfully in my chest, but my eyes never left the door in front of us. We burst into the vestibule, swaying wildly within the movement of the train, and then we leapt into the next car. The terror shattered in an instant. We were standing in the cafe car, but everything seemed normal. There were people, an old guy eating a sandwich, spilling bits of lettuce on his shirt, a young couple sharing a soda in a booth and giggling, a middle-aged woman buying chips at the counter. I glanced back. No grayish people with bloodshot eyes shushing us. No woman in a blue dress, no fake conductor. From what little I could see through the window, the vestibule was empty. No one had followed us. What the hell? "Can I help you, sir?" I looked up to see a skinny teenager behind the counter looking up at us, and then his smile faded. "Are you okay?" I thought about telling him everything that happened, but what if he was in on it? Clearly the people running the train knew about the fake conductor and the woman in the blue dress and the people in the quiet car. They were in the rules, yet they still chose to let us on board. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe the rules weren't designed to protect us. Maybe this was all one big game. "We're fine," I told him before sitting down in one of the booths. My entire body was shaking. I felt like I was going to faint at any moment. Nothing made sense. How did the fake conductor even get in the car behind us? I didn't hear him. He must have slipped in right after us and then hid in the seats. And the woman, how did she slip past us into the car in front of us? Wouldn't we have seen her? Unless they aren't people. A little voice in the back of my mind said, "We have to get out of here," I whispered to Amanda. "We can't, the rules said not to," she replied. "Oh, forget the rules, this is seriously messed up. What's the next stop? Trenton?" I tried doing some math in my head, figuring out how long we would have to stay on before the next stop. Less than an hour, I was sure of that. Maybe 30-40 minutes. "We can't get off the train until Boston, you know that," she said, more firmly this time. "But you were saying it yourself back there, that the rules might be meant to trap us here. Hey, we'll be fine until the morning. Look, how many people there are in here. None of them are dead, now are they? We wouldn't know if any of them were dead. They would probably throw the body overboard. Survivorship bias." We were getting strange looks now. The girl who had been giggling with her boyfriend was now staring at me, her dark eyes wide. She whispered something to her boyfriend, who gave me a warning glare. "Look, let's just call the police." I pulled out my phone. I had service. I could call 911 right now, tell them that we were on the train and that we were in danger. The police could meet us at Trenton. Whatever the rules said, it didn't matter. I started to dial 911. The line rang 3 times before a woman picked it up. Holding my hand over my mouth so no one else could hear what I was telling her, I described what was going on in the train and how we were in danger. I left out the things that didn't quite make sense, like the lake. When I had finished, the woman on the other end of the line asked me a single question. "You said a quick-track train." "Yes." "Sorry, we can't help you." And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, the blood draining out of my face. They said that they couldn't help us," I said in a squeaky voice, still staring in disbelief. "I'm gonna go get a Coke," Amanda said. "I need something. You want anything?" I shook my head, still reeling. How could Amanda be so normal about this? She seemed a little nervous, but not totally freaking out inside like I was. The woman, the fake conductor, all those people in the quiet car, that looked like there was something wrong with them. I watched Amanda lean over the counter talking to the teenager working there. But then I noticed something. There was something off. I squinted, trying to figure out why I was suddenly so unsettled, why the gears in my head were screeching to a grinding halt. And then I realized what was wrong. The tattoo on her arm. The letters on the tattoo looked like AI letters, warped and misshapen, not spelling any real words. It was a jumble of loops and glyphs. I rubbed my eyes. Must be the lighting in here, it's so dim, and she's like 10 feet away. I squinted, confused. Smack. I jumped about a foot in the air. My head swiveled towards the sound. No, no, no. The window in the vestibule door. Amanda's face was pressed against it. Blood was smeared across her cheeks and her mouth was open in a silent scream. I looked back at the Amanda at the counter with the warped tattoo. She was staring at me, smiling. I jumped out of the booth as the other Amanda started towards me. I scrambled towards the door. "Amanda! Amanda!" I screamed. Just as I got to the door, her body was yanked backwards. All that was left on the window was a smear of blood. The door didn't open. I pried my fingers into the gap and pulled with all my strength. Slowly, inch by inch, it began to budge. As soon as it was open wide enough, I wedged myself through, and as soon as I was in the vestibule, I realized what was wrong. It was filled with cold, gusting air. The door was open. The fake conductor was holding onto Amanda's arm, and she was hanging halfway out of the train. Her other arm pinwheeled in the wind, desperately trying to claw for purchase. I lunged for her, but the fake conductor slammed me back. His eyes gleamed at me as his mouth stretched into a grin. "Let her go," I shouted, and then I realized what my words meant. If he let go, she would fall out of the train. I lunged for her again, and my hands hit the cold steel floor of the vestibule, and I clawed towards her. I got an arm around her waist and pulled, trying to pull her back into the train. A black shoe slammed down on my hand, and I screamed. Amanda's eyes locked on mine as her hair blew wildly in the wind. "Please," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "Please help me." I reached for her hand, the one that the fake conductor wasn't holding. She tried to pull herself up, reaching for me. 2 hands shot out of the darkness behind me and grabbed her roughly by the shoulders. Arms clad in light blue sleeves. The conductor. I screamed. But then I realized who was pulling her back inside. A hand shot out and grabbed at me too, pulling me back in from the cold and whipping wind. I looked up to see the conductor, the real one, looking down at us. "Go back in," he shouted, shoving us back towards the cafe car. "I'll deal with them." Behind him on the ground, I could see the fake conductor. He looked up at us with a twisted grin. Amanda and I ran into the cafe car. The fake Amanda was now gone. The people sitting at the booths looked totally unperturbed, like they hadn't just heard Amanda and I screaming. I ushered her into a booth, shuffling in behind her and wrapped my arms around her. "I'm so sorry," I whispered in her ear. She didn't say anything. She just stared out into space, her bottom lip trembling. The real conductor burst in, coat flapping behind him, his face grim. He leaned over us. "You have to follow the rules," he said, his dark eyes boring into mine. "Is that clear?" We did. We tried." "No, you didn't," he growled, with so much anger that I jumped in my seat. "You could have died because of your stupidity. Follow the rules perfectly until you get off. Do you hear me?" "Yes. As long as you follow the rules, you will arrive in one piece." I swallowed, nodding. And then he asked to see our tickets. I pulled out my phone and brought up the ticket. His scanner made a little beep. Shaking his head, he walked away from us, his footsteps receding through the cafe car. "I want to go home," Amanda whispered, holding onto my arm tight. "Yeah, me too." I pulled out the flyer from my pocket and I reread the rules, and then I read them a third time into fourth. I checked the time, 11:04 p.m. 6 hours left. As long as we do everything this says, we'll be fine. Amanda took the flyer from my hands and read them too, over and over again, chewing on her lip. And then she stared straight ahead with a 1,000-yard stare. 6 hours, 13 minutes left. For 3 hours, we sat still in the cafe car, afraid to even move. The longer that we sat there, however, the more I became aware of the fact that there was something wrong with the passengers around us. The man eating the sandwich seemed to chew it in strange movements, like he didn't actually know how to properly eat. The young couple that was looking at us earlier were talking to each other in strange, hissing whispers. And strangest of all, the reflections of the other patrons seemed slightly warped. It almost looked like a filter or an illusion had been applied to their faces, but it wasn't syncing quite right in the reflections. But the rules didn't say anything about them, and they didn't seem to be bothering us. The real conductor came by once to check on us and give us another stern warning about the rules. All hell broke loose, however, at 2:27 a.m. The intercom rumbled to life above our heads. "Approaching Crystal River Station," a man's voice said. It was staticky and garbled, unlike the other announcements. "That was the station and the rules, wasn't it?" Amanda asked. "Yeah, we're supposed to close our eyes, I think." I glanced over to the rules again just to be sure. We closed our eyes tight. The brakes squealed underneath us and we rolled to a stop. I heard a door open somewhere and then movement, fluttering footsteps, creaking. Instinctively, I was dying to open my eyes, but I didn't. Cool air wafted into the train car along with a strange, sickly sweet scent, like something rotting mixed with something artificially sweet and flowery, almost like the perfume odor that we had smelled when we first got on the train. The air also felt heavy and damp, like after a heavy rainstorm or within a basement or a cave. It made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to concentrate on keeping my eyes shut. And then I felt it, a warm puff of air against the back of my neck. My stomach flipped. Nausea rolled over me. I leaned forward, praying the train would start moving again so that I could open my eyes. I felt another breath on my neck and felt another wave of nausea, and forced my brain to concentrate on something else. I started counting backwards from 100, 99, 98. When I reached 73, the train lurched into motion. I opened my eyes, glanced back, and I froze. There was an old woman sitting right behind me, right there. Her eyes sunk back in their sockets. Her skin clung loosely to her bones, and she was smiling. Rows of yellowish, rotted teeth glinted back at me. "Brian," Amanda said, snapping me out of it. And then I realized she had gone on at the Crystal River stop. The rules said if that happened to move to a different train car immediately. I jumped out of my seat. They didn't explicitly tell us not to look at or interact with the woman, but that was implied, wasn't it? I grabbed Amanda and we started for the front of the cafe car, but the woman leapt out of her seat, sidestepping in front of us and blocking our way. Despite her age, she was 6 feet tall and incredibly thin. The lights began to flicker overhead, and in the moments of darkness, her face looked more like a skull. Her lips quirked into a smile, and she reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a curved dagger. "When life is created, you must pass away," she said in a throaty rasp. Her eyes looked past me at Amanda. "Your blood has already forged your replacement. Now is your time." She lifted the dagger in the flickering light. We turned around and ran. I knew that we would be running back to the quiet car, but we didn't have a choice. The old woman followed us in slow, deliberate steps, a dagger raised. As we ran, the landscape outside flashed by. I saw strange things. Cavern walls stretching up towards the sky. A river cutting through the rock, crystal clear, glistening in the moonlight. Something clicked in my mind. Suddenly, Crystal River, River Styx, the underworld, the old woman who resembled death. All of these things flew through my mind as we scrambled into the vestibule, panting. And then we were standing at the door to the quiet car. Amanda glanced back at me, giving me a questioning look. I turned to see that the old woman was almost at the door, her dagger raised above her head. "We have to," I whispered to Amanda. "We just have to make sure to stay absolutely silent." She nodded. The door opened. The inhabitants of the quiet car had returned to their seats. They stared straight ahead, not looking at us. As long as we were perfectly silent, they would probably stay that way. At least I hoped that that was the case. I tiptoed down the aisle following Amanda. My shoes made the softest, tiniest thumps on the linoleum, but it didn't seem to draw attention. I glanced back to see the others looking straight ahead, paying no attention. But then it happened. I saw it in slow motion. Amanda's left foot smacked against one of the seats, and then her body twisted forward, arms flailing in front of her, scrambling for purchase. She fell flat on the floor. Her body made a loud thump. When I looked up, every eye was on us. "Oh no, no, no." I grabbed Amanda by the arms and hoisted her up, and then we ran for our lives. I could hear them moving behind us, but we kept running. We got to the end of the car, stumbled across the vestibule, and ran into the next car. I glanced back. They were following us. "Keep going," I shouted. We ran through car after car, but in the end we were trapped. We were in a 1,000-ton hull of steel rocketing through the night at 100 miles per hour. Jumping off the train would mean certain death, even if we could somehow get the windows open. And even if the train miraculously decided to stop right now, the rules said that we couldn't get off at any station other than our own. We were trapped. I glanced back at the people. They had entered the car, but they were frozen in their spots, mid-run, staring at us. Wait a second. I grabbed Amanda by the arm and turned around, so that I was walking backwards. They continued to stay frozen. "I think they can't move when we're looking at them," I told her. It seemed true. They didn't move a muscle as they stared at us with bloodshot eyes, hair gently swaying. The two of us walked backwards, slowly, carefully, keeping our eyes on the horde. But then my back hit something, the door to the next car. I glanced back and realized that we had made it to the last car, the one that we weren't supposed to enter. Yellow tape crisscrossed the door reading, "Caution," a sign right under the window read, "Keep out," in bold red letters. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface of the window. The train car beyond was totally dark. "What now?" Amanda whispered, squeezing my hand. "I don't know, keep your eyes on them for a second, okay?" I cupped my hands over the window and peered into the car. All of the lights were out. In the darkness, I could make out the vague contours of chairs, windows, an aisle threading down the middle, but it was incredibly dark inside. I couldn't tell whether anybody was in the car or if it was empty. "The rules said not to go in," I said. "Oh, forget the rules," Amanda shouted back. "It's either go in there or die." I glanced back. Amanda was right. The people from the quiet car were halfway down the aisle. Some were on the floor crawling on all fours, pale fingers splayed out across the linoleum, heads tilted upwards to look at us with bloodshot eyes. Others were crouched in the surrounding seats, peering up at us from over the seatbacks. A few stood in the vestibule, peering hungrily at us through the window. We only had one option. As long as we're looking at them, they can't move, so we have to stand here for the next 3 hours and stare at them. I don't know if I can, she replied, her voice wavering. I'm so tired. I know, but we have to do it to survive, okay? Keeping my eyes on them, I led us to the nearest seats and sat down. I leaned into the aisle, staring at them, statue still. You can rest, I told Amanda. I won't take my eyes off them. You can't, she whispered. Just rest. Seconds ticked by, and then minutes. Every time that the train swayed, the people did too, just barely. Their expressions never changed, eyes too wide, some of them grinning, but I could tell that they were alive because every so often they blinked. And then about 10 minutes into it, the unthinkable happened. The lights flickered overhead and went out. And the darkness was immediately filled with the sounds of them pawing across the aisle, stumbling and running, desperately clawing their way toward us. Our options narrowed to one. I yanked Amanda out of the seat with me, opened the door, and we careened into the vestibule. The metal plates of the floor slipped and shifted underneath us. Trees and grass blurred past us through the windows. The wind rushed in our ears. I ran to the door and pried it open, and then we slipped through. We were in the final car. We were breaking the rules. I heard the thwack of the horde's bodies hitting the door behind us. They weren't following us. Even they feared the final car apparently. They wouldn't dare enter. I had most certainly decided our death. But hopefully it wouldn't be as painful as being clawed apart by whatever they were. The car was dark. I fumbled into the first seat, pulling Amanda with me. The two of us sat in the darkness, the silence. And then I heard it. Drip. The sound of liquid hitting the linoleum floor, coming from somewhere behind us. Do you hear that? I whispered to Amanda. She nodded in the darkness. My eyes were slowly adjusting to the darkness. I could make out the vague outlines of the seats in front of us, the darkness of the windows. Pitch black again, no lights, no buildings, no sign of civilization. It's like we were traveling through a pitch black expanse of space, disconnected from the rest of the world. I could see the plastic paneling around the windows, the darkness under these seats in front of us. I noticed now the car was lit by dim, yellowish lights coming from inside the paneling, some sort of emergency lighting system. I hadn't even noticed it when we had entered, only now that my eyes were adjusting to the darkness. The dripping sound continued. I slowly turned around. At first, I didn't see anything, just the empty train car, the rows of seats, the pitch black windows. But then I heard it again. Drip. And my brain was able to pinpoint the sound. There was a small puddle on the floor, dimly reflecting the light. My gaze followed it upwards, and I saw two pale fingers poking from the armrest behind us. They were covered in blood, slick, black, and glistening. Drip. I swallowed. The train car seemed to tilt and spin underneath me. There's somebody back there, I told Amanda, squeezing her arm. She leaned over me and glanced back. As soon as she saw it, she froze. Is that blood? I nodded. The dripping continued, pounding into my brain. Drip, 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 like a ticking clock inside my skull. I glanced back again, this time standing up slightly to get a better look. I froze. It was the young couple that we had seen board the train in Philadelphia, but they were dead. Long gashes covered their chests, blood caked their hair and dripped on their arms. Their mouths were open in silent screams. They weren't the only ones. Other people occupied the rows behind us. I couldn't see them fully, just bits of arms and shoulders and heads poking out. But they were all deathly still. They were all covered in blood. "This car, it's where they keep the bodies," I choked. Amanda looked up at me. "We're going to die here." I sat back down and wrapped my arms around her. "No, we're not. We're going to get out of here." But I knew that was a lie. As we sat in the silence, I heard another sound. It was so soft that I didn't hear it at first, but now, as my mind got used to the dripping, I could pick it out. It was a soft, pulsing sound. The sound that you hear when you put your fingers in your ears and hear your own heartbeat. The sound of pulsing liquid. I turned around and slowly stood up. I forced myself to look down at the deceased couple behind us. There was a thin rope of something wet and shiny that attached to each of their wrists. I peered over our seat backs looking for what it attached to, and then I saw it. A sort of pod lying on the floor, wet and pulsing. Two of them, one attached to each person. In the woman's, I could see the contours of a face pressed against the membrane skin of the pod. I turned. Amanda was looking down at them too, her mouth hanging open. "They're making clones," I whispered. And then it all made sense. The clones were being made from the victim's blood. And Amanda, she had stuffed all those bloody tissues in the trash at the beginning of the trip. Somebody had fished them out and used them to make her clone. And then the fake conductor, the old woman. They were all trying to kill her to make way for this new life. But before I could tell Amanda this, the intercom rumbled to life. "Smithson Junction, service stop only." "We have to get off," Amanda said, her voice frantic. "Now." She tore away from me, running for the door. "Amanda, no!" I reached for her, but she slipped out of my grasp. The vestibule door opened in front of her and she ran through. I ran in after her and in the nick of time wrapped my arms around her tightly. "Let me go," she shrieked. "They said that we can't get off here. We can only get off at our stop. We're going to die." The door to the outside slid open with a horrible screech. The station looked like it had been abandoned for years. The concrete platform was stained and pitted. Nature had tried to reclaim it, sending up long vines that clung to the concrete, curled up the sign. The letters were faded and the entire metal sign was rusted, looking almost blood-stained. A small building with a gabled roof sat across the platform, the windows shuttered, the roof collapsing in on itself. Beyond it, a forest stretched in every direction, pitch black. Amanda began to sob in my arms. I held her, rocking her gently as we stared out at the dilapidated station. I would have given anything to step off the train at that moment and be somewhere, anywhere else. This would probably be the last time that I breathed any fresh air, the last time I felt the moonlight on my face. We would die in this steel prison sometime before 5:17 a.m., before we made it to Boston. Would they ever find our bodies, or would we and all the bodies in car number 12 be buried or burned? Would the news say that we eloped somewhere, ran away because our families disapproved? Everybody would picture us living out our best lives on an island somewhere. No one would ever know that we died in the darkness of an old rotting train, screaming for our lives. "I love you," I whispered to Amanda. "Whatever happens, I love you too." The door to the train car rattled open and my entire body froze. This is it. And when I looked up, I saw the conductor. "Get off," he said. "What?" He gestured to the open door. "I said get off." "But the rules." "I'm trying to save your lives, okay?" he shouted. "Get off the car now." Amanda and I looked at each other, and then she grabbed my arm and yanked me forward. The two of us leapt off the train car and onto the dilapidated platform. Seconds later, the doors closed behind us. We ran for our lives. Across the platform, down into the empty parking lot, a single street lamp flickered above us. The forest surrounded us. A whistle pierced the silence and I looked up to see the train pulling away. I could see several people with grayish skin watching us, faces pressed against the glass. And then the final car with its dark windows, an enormous steel coffin, no, a womb, snaking down the track and into the great unknown. And then there was only silence. "Where are we?" I asked. I thought maybe that we were stranded in a place disconnected from reality, like the enormous lake that we had crossed. But Amanda pulled out her phone and as she zoomed out, I saw we were somewhere in Connecticut, around where we should be. She called 911 and then we sat on the cracked asphalt waiting for the police to arrive. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint whistle of a train. It almost sounded like a scream. I was jolted back to consciousness by a violent coughing fit caused by the unnaturally dry air around me. Drops of sweat had piled up and started trickling down my forehead. It was dark, not a single ray of light to even make out my closest surroundings. My memory served a little help in recognizing my whereabouts, but upon fumbling around with my weak hands, I noticed that I was sitting in a fabric-coated chair in a room that seemed to vibrate ever so slightly. As my eyes started to adapt to the overwhelming darkness, I could start to make out the vague shape of my room. There were 3 seats facing each other with windows on the right-hand side, though they revealed nothing more than an empty void on the other side. On the other side was a door with a small window, which led out into a hallway, and then it dawned on me where I had woken up. It was a train compartment and the train was still moving, though seemingly rid of any other people. I tried to get up, but my legs refused to properly cooperate. They were too weak as if they hadn't been used for days. And then some of my memories returned. I was traveling. I remembered getting on the train. Though I hadn't the faintest idea what my destination should have been, my memories simply cut short after stepping inside my empty compartment that had been November 12th. I checked my pockets to look for clues. I found my phone, which had long since ran out of power, and my wallet, though it contained a ticket. In the dark, it just looked like weird scribbles on a piece of paper. With an incredible amount of effort, I finally managed to get my legs working enough to stand up. Though I had to use the wall as support, it was enough to move around, and I soon stumbled into the hallway of my train car. I took a moment to look through the windows in the hallway, and the world outside was empty. It both looked and felt as if nothing existed outside of the boundaries of the train. The darkness made it hard to navigate without falling to the ground. I tried to look for a light switch or at the very least another person to help me out, but none were in sight. I peeked in through the window into the next compartment and I could see the vague shape of people sitting still in their seats, but upon trying to enter I realized that the door was locked. I tried to knock, but the people on the other side didn't even flinch. When I tried to call out for them, I realized that my voice had almost completely vanished, replaced by just a whisper. I made my way from compartment to compartment, and while they all seemed to be occupied, none would open, and not a single person responded to my increasingly frantic knocks. As I reached the last compartment of the car, the train turned ever so slightly on its tracks, enough to knock me to the ground. While I lay there, I tried to call out for help with my barely audible voice, but nobody could hear me. I got to my feet while the train still turned and noticed the door to the last compartment slowly glide open from the turn. "Hello, can anybody hear me?" I called out with a trembling voice as I approached the open door. No response, either because the compartment was empty or because my voice hadn't been used for so long that it barely functioned. I slowly peeked my head around the corner to see the compartment fully occupied by dark figures, all of them sitting perfectly still in their seats. "Hello," I said again. I took a step inside. My eyes had started to fully adjust to my dark surroundings, and I quickly realized that not only were the people sitting perfectly still, but they weren't even breathing. The horrible thought of them being dead struck me like a hammer, but I had to make sure. I bent down on my knees next to the closest man and I shook him gently. Still, he didn't respond. I then checked for a pulse, and though I'm not a doctor, I couldn't find any signs of life. I heard a small beep that shot me to my feet, and I looked down to see the man wearing a digital watch that alerted him that an hour had passed. I looked at the watch and noticed the date was also written in the center, the 29th of November. It had been 17 days since I had boarded the train. With a trembling hand, I checked the rest of the people for signs of life. All of them were beyond a shadow of a doubt dead. Panic arose in my body, both from the presence of dead people and from the realization that I had been asleep on a moving train for more than 2 weeks. I collapsed to the ground in front of one of the dead passengers. She was an elderly woman dressed elegantly with wide open and piercing blue eyes. I didn't want to stay in the compartment with them, but I was paralyzed by the lack of a plan. There I sat, surrounded by 6 dead people, trying to contemplate my next stop. The train was still moving, which clearly meant that somebody had to be in control of it. A conductor, or at least somebody with an idea as to what the hell was going on. And so I decided that my best bet would be to make my way to the locomotive and pray that not everybody had died on the train. All the while these thoughts ran through my head, I couldn't take my eyes off the elderly lady. Something just felt off by their presence. Firstly, there wasn't any smell, meaning that they hadn't started to decompose. And secondly, all of them had their eyes open wider than I thought possible. Before I could consider the bizarre situation any further, the woman suddenly blinked. I shot to my feet in horror as she blinked again. I double-checked her pulse, still nothing, yet her eyes kept blinking without any other signs of life. In shock, I looked around to find that the other 5 dead passengers were also blinking rapidly. Without checking them for life, I jumped out from the compartment and shot the door. I noticed a chunk of wood missing from it, as if somebody had kicked it in, leaving it unable to properly close. As I slowly backed away from the compartment, I glimpsed out through the windows into the empty void beyond. I humored the thought that we might be driving through a tunnel, but if so, how long could it possibly be? I stepped into the next train car. Unlike the previous one, it wasn't divided into compartments, but rather filled with rows of seats split in the middle by a central passage. But like the compartments, each seat was occupied by a dead passenger, each blinking in response as I quickly passed in panic. I walked through about 15 such cars, each alternating by rows of seats and compartments. It felt like hours had passed as I made my way towards the locomotive, and just as I was about to enter through a door marked first class, I was shoved to the floor by someone holding a bright light to my face. "Stay the hell down," a deep voice shouted at me. Speechless, I could do nothing but comply with the man in front of me. "Wait, you're not dead?" the man asked. As he realized I was basically just a kid, barely in my 20s, he moved the light away from me and reached out a hand to help me up. "Hey, my bad, I just heard someone moving around and thought that you were one of them," he said as he pointed to the lifeless people sitting idly by in their seats. "What's your name?" he asked. I'm Thomas," I stuttered. As the shock from the bright light faded, I saw that the man was dressed in a police uniform, well-built and bald. "The name's John Hendricks," he said, "and we better get out of here before these things wake up again." "They're not dead?" I asked. "Yeah, well, not exactly. It's like they're in hibernation." I looked at him in confusion. "People in hibernation?" "They ain't people, kid, not anymore." As he spoke those words, he seemed surprised by something behind me. "Shit, I was too slow," he said, oddly calm. I turned around to see the people moving their heads around, all of them staring directly at us, their eyes now fixed and unblinking. "We need to get out of here," John said as he pulled my arm and dragged me in through the door to another compartment car, though far nicer than the one that I had awoken in. All the doors had opened and the people were slowly piling out from each compartment into the hallway, staring at us with their wide open eyes. We dove into the first available compartment, and the officer pushed one of the people out from it and locked the door. He sighed. "We'll be safe here for a bit. Hopefully they're just scouting." "What the hell is?" I started saying before the cop put his hand over my mouth. gesturing for me to keep quiet. "Keep it down, would ya?" he said quietly, clearly agitated by my idiocy. "What's happening?" I whispered. "We've got to hold up in here until they go back to sleep." He stood up and peeked out the window into the hallway, before pulling down quickly back behind cover. "The other passengers, what happened to them?" I asked. "Dead. Most of them anyways. Got a few survivors camped up in the dining car. I just came out to look for batteries, hoping that we could get a phone working and get help. How the hell did you survive here all on your own?" I don't know. I just woke up an hour ago," I said. I took out the ticket from my pocket and tried to read it. Officer Hendricks took his flashlight and set it to its lowest setting to help me read. The text on the ticket was a language that I didn't recognize, just jumbled symbols and a date. "Yeah, it's the same with all of our tickets as well. None of this makes any damn sense." "Do you remember where the train is going?" I asked. He shook his head. "The people out there seem fairly docile. Can't we push our way through? They don't seem to be moving," I asked. He sighed again. "I'm not afraid of the things out there. It's what comes next that terrifies me." "What is it?" "Hell, I don't even know what it really looks like. It's massive and dark. It just uses those things to look around for survivors. We call them." As he tried to finish the sentence, a large thud could be heard on the other side of the door. I carefully peeked out through the window to see that all the people had collapsed back to the ground, and that the door leading to the car behind us had opened up. A tall obsidian black creature pulled its way inside using large tendril-like appendages. It had thin stumps that resembled legs and multiple more tendrils that slithered along the walls, seeming to sense its surroundings. Though it was vaguely humanoid in nature, it didn't have a head or any eyes. John lifted a finger to his lip and signaled for me to be absolutely silent. I noticed then that he had a gun holstered attached to his belt. I pointed to it without saying a word, but he just shook his head in response. The creature moved closer, and before long it was standing just outside the door. Its arms spread out, flattening out and covering the window. It started to form small cracks in the glass pane, allowing small tendrils to seep through. "God damn it," John whispered as sweat poured down his face. Suddenly he stood up and kicked the door, breaking it straight off its hinges. It barely phased the creature, but it allowed us for enough wiggle room to bolt past it. He grabbed me and pushed me through the gap between the wall and the creature, getting caught up in its tendrils as he did. They latched onto him and buried into his leg. "Run!" he yelled in agony as he tried to fight off the tendrils wrapping around him. Still feeling weak, I fell onto the floor of the hallway as John desperately tried to get free from the rapidly enveloping tendrils around his leg. As their grip tightened, his service weapon, still in its holster, fell to the ground, out of reach from him. "What are you waiting for? Get out of here," he yelled. Refusing his orders, I dove to the floor and grabbed his gun. With the absolute minimal amount of firearms knowledge that I possessed, I picked up the weapon and started firing at the center of the creature, frantically pulling the trigger, and I didn't stop until the excessively loud shots were replaced by silent clicks. Though the rounds had barely phased the creature, it loosened its grip on John just enough for him to crawl away from a certain death. I helped him to his bleeding feet, and together we rushed through into the next train car, where we pulled loose some chairs and used them as a poorly constructed blockade to slow down the creature. We continued through the car, repeatedly tripping over the dozens of corpses littering the floor. I took a peek back at the barricade to see the creature slowly seeping through like a black fog, before reforming itself on the other side. "Hurry up," John yelled at me. The creature had almost fully formed by the time that we got through the next car. Unable to grab us, it quickly realized that we were out of reach, and in response, it split open its body down the middle, revealing rows of black teeth and multiple tendrils that resembled tongues. It let out a horrific high-pitched shriek that shook the entire train, almost destroying my eardrums. The sound itself awakened the dead people strewn across the hallway. They lifted their heads and looked around until they fixated their eyes on us, which alerted the creature to our presence. It moved quickly, all the while its tendrils stretched impossibly far towards us in a hungry attempt at catching us. We were almost at the dining car when I fell back to the ground. A tendril had wrapped around my shoe and John quickly grabbed my arms as I was pulled away. I screamed and the door to the dining car shot open. 2 men and a woman ran over and helped John pull me free from the tendril's grip. One of my shoes slid off in the process, allowing me to get away. We ran through the door and shut it behind us while one of the men pulled a large metal rod through a makeshift lock. Both John and I lay wheezing on the floor from exhaustion as I tried to look around, observing my new surroundings. The car was full of booths with a small bar all the way up front, covered in canned foods and bottled water. In the corner, I saw a few bags full of waste and empty food wrappings. The entire car was dimly lit up by a couple of rows of emergency lights on the ceiling, and it was clear that they had survived there for a couple of weeks already. Though if the 4 of them were all that remained, I didn't know. "What the hell happened to you, John?" a man in his 50s asked. They must have seen me coming. I don't know how," John said, still out of breath. They kept looking at him in shock, not satisfied by his answer, and so he continued. "I didn't even use the flashlight until I saw Thomas here, and by then they had already awoken." "So you waited until they went back to sleep?" the woman asked. "No, they had already seen us. We had to make a run for it. I came back as quickly as I could." His last sentences shut everyone up, and John stared confused at them. "John, you were gone for 2 days, she finally said. "Don't be ridiculous, I was gone for a couple of hours at the most." She pulled out a digital watch and showed John the time and date. "It's December 1st, she said quietly. "That's..." John trailed off, speechless by the realization. "How did they see you anyway? They're not exactly observant unless somebody disturbs them," one of the men said in a condescending tone. "I don't know, Frank. Do you think that I did it on purpose?" I thought back to the old lady that I had seen in the first compartment, and I realized that John hadn't been discovered at all. I was the one that got caught. "Officer, I tried to say before John interrupted me. "John," he corrected me. "We're in another dimension or some shit. No need for ranks or titles." I tried to confess again, but the woman noticed John's bleeding leg and rushed over to him. "You're bleeding," she said. "That's nothing. The sentinel got a hold of my leg. Don't worry, I'm fine. Just sit down, let me have a look anyway." John sat down and the woman rolled up his trouser leg to reveal deep gashes in his calf. "You'll need stitches. Get me the med kit, will you?" she said as she pointed to Frank. While she did her best to fix up John's leg, I got a better look at the door. They had reinforced it with pieces of metal around the edges, also covering the window, preventing the creature from seeping in through the cracks, and its surveyors from seeing through it. On the wall beside the door, somebody had etched lines, marking each day gone by. 19 lines for 19 days passed on a train that never stops. The oldest man, Frank, came over to me, looking as suspicious as ever. "Who are you?" he asked firmly. "Thomas," I responded. "You want to tell us how the hell you survived 19 days all on your own without food or water?" I couldn't answer his question. To me, only a few hours had passed, and though I felt thirsty from fleeing, I wasn't even close to being parched. I don't know," I stuttered. "What do you mean you don't know? How can you not know?" Frank said, getting agitated. "Give him a break, Frank. If you hadn't have left your bag behind, I wouldn't even have had to go out and risk my life," John interjected. It was enough to shut Frank up. Though an asshole, he knew his place in the group. The other younger guy came up to me and reached out his hand. "I'm Philip, and that's Maya," he said as he pointed to the woman fixing up John. "And lastly, that's Frank. Don't pay him any attention, he's a pain in the ass 90% of the time." "Whatever," Frank interrupted. "Did you get the batteries at least?" "Of course I did, you idiot. They're in the bag," John said. I just stood there trying to get a grasp on the situation, barely responding to the other's questions. "Don't worry about it, Thomas. Maya said as she noticed the absolutely baffled expression on my face. Huh? None of us remember what happened. We all just woke up at different times on the train and had the idea to make our way here. It's safe, mostly, and the sentinels keep us from going out very often. You're lucky that John found you. Sentinels? The thing that chased us, John explained. A bright light penetrated the otherwise gloomy car as Frank booted up his phone using one of the battery packs. Without hesitation, he attempted to dial a number. Put it on speaker if you're trying to call someone, John said, still waiting for Maya to finish bandaging his leg. No one responded on the other end, but no sooner had Frank lowered the phone to put in another number, it started ringing, a blocked caller ID. For a few moments, he just held the phone in shock before he regained his senses and he answered. Hello? No response. Hello, can anyone hear us? Frank asked again. We listened intently to the emptiness on the other side of the line, and a minute passed without anyone speaking. There's no one there, Maya said. Before any of us could respond, the phone started emitting repetitive beeping sounds. It continued for almost a full minute, none of us daring to speak up while we listened. Once it was finished, the call ended on its own, and Frank looked around at us wearing a confused expression. What the hell was that? John asked. No clue, a bunch of beeps. Destination, Gehenna, 108 hours. Do not get off the train, I said. What? It was Morse code. I learned it as a kid to secretly communicate in class. I know it's dumb, I was a geek, but I'm absolutely sure that's what the message said. They looked at each other for a moment, still visibly confused, and then back at me. Gehenna, what does it mean? Maya asked. Forget that, Frank interjected. Why are they telling us to stay on this train? We fell silent again as Frank attempted to dial another number, but to no avail. 108 hours, just over 4 days before we reach our next station. We can do that, we just gotta stay here. We have enough provisions for at least 2 weeks, John said. So that's it? We just sit here in the dark for another 4 days, Frank asked. A small argument ensued, and while they discussed what we would do at the train station, I took a moment to look out the window. The vast emptiness was horrifying on its own. I wondered how far the darkness reached, if it had an end, or if anything lived in the void. A part of me felt dead as I pondered these questions, as if the train was nothing more than a mere figment of my decaying mind, but the pain was ever too real. The tiredness felt too overwhelming for the world to be fake. I took my dead phone and grabbed one of the battery packs and plugged it in. The others were too busy discussing to notice me wasting power, but I just needed to write down some of my thoughts over text, ready to send if we happened to get a signal. I sent it to my dad, hoping that he would share the story should I not make it back. While I patiently waited for the text to go through, I kept staring into the dark. Some parts were blacker than their surroundings, and then I noticed that they weren't just patches that contrasted with the rest of the environment, but moving things, almost vanta black, like a shadow moving through the night. It glided in the air alongside the train, quietly looming by with its eyeless body. It was a sentinel. Guys, I said quietly. They kept on arguing. Guys, there's a sentinel outside, I said much louder. John broke off from the argument and everyone fell silent as we watched the creature fly beside the train. And then we noticed another and a third and a fourth, and before long we could make out hundreds, if not thousands of sentinels following the train. Don't worry, they shouldn't be able to see or hear us without their surveyors, Philip said. We all kept staring at the shadowy things in the void, and though Philip was right, they couldn't possibly see us without their aids. There was one undeniable fact about them that just didn't make sense. They were getting closer. John grabbed and pulled me down to the floor away from the window. Stay down, he whispered. While we lay there, Frank and Philip rushed to cover up the windows with whatever debris and furniture that they could get loose from the floor. "Do they know that we're here?" Maya asked. "It doesn't matter. We ain't risking it. We need to survive for 4 more days until we reach Gehenna," John responded. They were quick to block the windows, and within a minute we had all settled down on the floor, where we tried to discuss our next move as quietly as possible. On the other side of the door leading to the next car, we could hear the shuffling of surveyors trying to get in. They knew that we were here, which meant that the sentinels would be alerted very soon. "They're behind the door," Frank said. "Can they hear us?" "I don't know, but stay quiet anyway. They might not know for sure that we're in here," John said. "What about your gun? If we just kill the surveyors, they won't be able to alert the sentinels." "I don't have any ammo. And besides, that idea is stupid." Even with the emergency lights dimly illuminating our car, it was hard to make out our surroundings, and with no idea how to turn them off, we could only pray that the surveyors didn't notice them either. A few hours passed with none of us daring to speak up, all fearing that the sentinels would come bursting in through the windows at any moment. The only one moving was Maya, and she only did so to check on John's leg. "Do we have any antibiotics in the bag?" she asked. Philip opened and rummaged through a large travel bag. In the dark, he couldn't see much, and after a minute, he decided to empty the bag of all the random items that they had gathered on the train, finally pulling out a box of pills. "Amoxicillin?" he half asked, half said. "That's all we have?" Maya asked. Philip nodded and tossed Maya the box. She handed them over to John, giving him instructions on when and how many to take. The first 24 hours, each marked by an innocuous beep from Maya's digital watch. I couldn't get my mind off that name. Gehenna. It sounded familiar. It was definitely something that I had heard before, if only to be stuffed away in the back of my mind, polluted by pointless information that I had gathered throughout my life. 42 hours passed as counted by the beeps. People were getting restless, unable to stand up and move around without alerting the surveyors. We still hadn't made a decision whether to stay on the train as we had reached Gehenna, or to bail and try out our own luck elsewhere. "Are we really going to listen to some cryptic message?" Philip asked. "Like, I don't want to be all pessimistic, but why should we trust them?" "They're telling us to stay on the train, but do they mean as it stops or now while it's heading there?" Maya asked. It doesn't matter. Shouldn't we just do the exact opposite of what they tell us?" "No, whatever happens, we're getting the hell off this train when it stops. As long as there's solid ground to walk on, we're not staying a minute longer than we have to," John interjected. 60 hours passed and the void lingered outside of our train, ever present and full of unseen horrors. Despite the stress, I had somehow managed to drift off to sleep. Though restless, it was a deep sleep occupied by an incredibly vivid dream of Gehenna. I saw it as an empty ruin of a city, trapped in the center of a steep valley. Maya and Frank stood by my side with defeated expressions on their faces. As we observed our surroundings, a bright light lit up the gray sky, almost blinding us with its presence. I tried to lift my arms to block out at least some of the light, but I couldn't lift them. Something within the light had paralyzed me, surging through my body with intense pain. As I winced in agony, my mind suddenly felt clearer than it ever had, and then I remembered. It was just a piece of fragmented information long since forgotten that I had learned during my childhood during some religious class. Gehenna. It was hell, and we were heading straight for it. I awoke abruptly due to a high-pitched, glaring sound emitting from a speaker system hidden in the ceiling. It jolted all of us to our feet in panic as we tried to decipher what it meant. "What the hell is that sound?" John yelled as he clutched his ears. It was rhythmic, Morse code, just like before. Though in the mess of static and distortion, I could barely make out the individual beeps. After a couple of minutes, despite the mess of sounds, it became apparent that the sound was just a loop of beeps with a simple message played on repeat. Leaving Vacas, stand by. It was incredibly loud, vibrating enough to loosen the already fragile barricade in front of the door and windows. On the other side, the surveyors were trying to break through, and with a final push, the door gave in. Dozens of them flooded in through the broken barricade, stumbling over each other in the process. All the while, they kept their eyes fixated on each of us, non-blinking, full of agony. "Push them out!" John yelled as he rushed at them with a stick, shoving the one furthest behind back through the door and then the next, but they kept getting back up. The rest of us rushed in to aid John in his futile attempt, but before we could even reach him, every single window on the train shattered from the force of hundreds of sentinels throwing their mangled bodies at the car. Covered in shards of broken glass, I fell to the ground alongside Frank, who tried to use me for balance. A piece of glass cut my left eye, temporarily blinding me from pain. As I got the piece of glass out, I saw the sentinels digging their way through the broken windows, turning to a vicious fog and pouring in through each crack in our barricade, reforming themselves on the other side just like before. It was hopeless, and all we could do was stand there in frozen panic, unable to think of any plausible escape. Maya and Philip had sought cover in one of the corners where they sat embracing each other, while John charged at the sentinels wielding nothing more than a kitchen knife. As the mix of sentinels and surveyors came at us, the alarm kept blaring and I prepared for my quickly approaching demise. Leaving Vacas, stand by. Suddenly, an impossibly bright light filled the entire void, instantly turning the sentinels to mere filaments of darkness lingering in the air. It persisted for minutes, completely blinding out any memory of the empty void that we had left behind. And then the speaker gave out a new message in the form of Morse code. Destination, Gehenna, 18 hours. Do not get off the train, the code said. As quickly as it had come, the light faded. It took a while before our eyes had adjusted, but once they did, we were greeted by a brand new world outside the windows. The once empty void had been replaced by endless fields of bright green grass, only contrasted by tall blue mountains in the horizon, miles and miles away. The sentinels themselves had all but vanished, while the surveyors had turned back into lifeless corpses, now doing nothing more than littering the hallways. Where are we?" Maya asked. "Gehenna, did we make it?" Frank asked. "No, we still have 18 hours to go," I corrected him. I took a hopeful look out the window and stared at the lush fields just out of reach. The ground looked so soft, and I contemplated for a moment whether it would be smarter to just jump off the train. That idea was quickly put to rest as I got a look around the train, now filled with blissful daylight that had immediately changed the mood. "All right, let's head for the locomotive and try to shut the train down," John said. We quickly made our way through the train, littered with the fresh corpses of people that had died weeks ago. Their connections to these sentinels had been broken, leaving them limp on the ground with no direction. Once we had reached the locomotive, we were faced with a heavy iron wall blocking our entrance, a door with no handle nor a keyhole to open it. "Ah, great, what now?" Frank asked. Maybe we can climb out one of the windows and get there from the outside," John suggested. Before we could even indulge the idea of climbing on the outside of a moving train, we were all shoved to the ground as the train rapidly lost speed. The tracks screeched as the wheels locked themselves in place, and we quickly came to a sudden stop. "What the hell just happened?" "We've stopped, but there's no platform or anything outside," Maya said as she peeked outside the window. "That doesn't matter, get your stuff, we're getting off this nightmare." We returned to the dining car and picked up our bags, alongside any amount of food and supplies that we could carry. We hadn't yet reached Gehenna, but considering the implications that we were heading straight for hell, This would be a safer bet. For the first time in weeks, we stepped down onto solid ground, with a brilliant green field only a few feet away from us. Philip took charge, carrying what little medical supplies we had left, while John followed. There was a decently brisk wind that felt great in an otherwise hot climate, but the grass didn't seem to sway even the slightest. As minute a detail as it seemed, it warranted a closer look. They were crystals, green, razor-sharp crystals that from just a few feet away resembled blades of grass. "Wait, don't!" I tried to yell, but it was too late, and Philip stepped down hard onto the field. "Oh God!" he yelled as the crystals cut through his shoes into the sole of his foot. The rest of us froze in our step as we saw Philip pull back in agony, clutching his leg. "It's not grass," I trailed off. "God, it hurts," Philip groaned. Maya instinctively ran to his aid and pulled off his shoe. "Here, let me have a look," she said. There were green crystals embedded deep in his sole, covered in jagged edges, making it almost impossible to pull out without causing more damage. "We've got to get you back on the..." Maya froze mid-sentence. The crystal was spreading with tiny shards breaking off, embedding themselves into Philip's skin, and tearing through it as they grew. What's happening?" Philip stuttered. Though the growth was slow at first, it quickly sped up, covering his entire foot within a minute before proceeding up his leg. "Get them off me!" he yelled in pain as Maya reached out to try to rip them off, but John stopped her before she could touch them. "Wait, no, you'll get them on you too," John yelled. He pulled out his knife and got ready to peel the shards off Philip, but the crystal simply cut through the knife like butter, spreading onto that as well. In shock, John stumbled back and dropped his knife. Maya once again tried to run over and help him, but we all held her back. All we could do was stare at Philip as the crystals dug their way into his body, his bones audibly cracking and his skin rupturing as they continued spreading. He just lay there screaming in agony until the crystals got to his lungs, and before long his entire body had been turned to a rock. Before we could process or mourn our loss, the crystals started spreading along the ground, slowly making their way towards us. "Back on the train," John screamed. As we got back aboard, we did our best to seal the doors and windows, but even then we had no proof that it would stop the spread. The train had broken down, and with no way of it getting back up and running, all we could do was wait as the green field of crystals spread onto the train and then to us. It's just a matter of time. Maya stared out through the train window, her eyes fixated on the crystallized remains of Philip. They had known each other most of their lives, and now he had become nothing more than a memory, forever preserved within the green rocks. It had been a day since the train broke down, but despite the time that had passed, there wasn't any noticeable change in daylight. The sky hung above us, blue and bright, though no sun existed to let us know whether we were still on Earth. Instead, the light seemed evenly distributed across the sky with no visible source. I tried my best to comfort Maya, though nothing that I could say would ease the loss and trauma that we had all just experienced. Our best bet would be to simply keep everybody alive through the next part of our horrific nightmare. Though the crystals had slowed down once we had retreated, they kept reaching out for the train, and they had already covered 2 of the cars in the back, slowly inching their way ahead during the day that we had been stuck. They seemed to react to touch, spreading faster with any interaction between us and the environment outside the train. While trapped in the morbidly beautiful landscape, John had taken it upon himself to find a way into the locomotive. The entrance had been sealed by a heavy metal wall, and it seemed that even from the outside, there wasn't any windows nor a feasible way of entering. It was simply a block of iron that had effortlessly dragged us through 2 dimensions, broken down only to cause us pain. John, as fit as he was, had turned into a spitting image of death himself, both from exhaustion and the infection spreading through his wounded leg. Pearls of sweat formed on his forehead as he looked for different tools to smash his way through the wall, a noble but futile effort. "Hey John, you need to get some rest. I demanded carefully as I noticed him on the brink of collapse. I didn't dare say too much against him, both from fear of pissing him off and because he stood our best chance of escape. "No, I'm fine," he shouted back as he popped a couple of pills, a mixture between antibiotics and painkillers. He leaned against the wall looking out through the window at the ever-growing crystals outside. "There's no time to stop. If we don't do anything, we'll be dead in a matter of days. I know, John, but we can work without you for a couple of hours. You have to take care of yourself. Just leave me alone. I need to think. There has to be a way inside, I know it," he said as he shoved his way past me, off to search for more tools. The train had turned quiet, illuminated by bright light from the sunless sky above. The air felt heavy and was filled with the stench of dead surveyors, but it was still preferable to the threat of sentinels. And in addition, it was now an easy task to search for both supplies and any equipment that we could use to aid us in our escape attempts. Another day passed in the fields of crystals, and Maya still hadn't spoken a word, apart from checking on John's bandaged wound and instructing him to keep taking the antibiotics. Of course, despite the inflamed and painful cut in his leg, he refused any rest. Frank and I eventually decided that we would force him to take a break, even if it meant physically restraining him. After a short talk with Maya to make sure that she agreed, we set out to force John into temporary retirement. He had turned oddly quiet, and we had to search every car to finally find him collapsed on the ground with the bandages ripped off and black liquid oozing out from the wound. Before we could even call Maya in to help, the train jolted into movement, quickly coming to a stop as the back cars had fused together with the crystals. "The train, it's working again," Frank yelled excitedly, before realizing that we weren't actually moving. We looked at each other in sudden realization and shouted simultaneously, "The cars! We have to disconnect them," Frank suggested. "You do that, I'm gonna stay with John. Tell Maya that we need her quickly," I said as Frank started running to the back of the train. I sat down and shook John in an attempt at waking him, and while he didn't respond, at least he was breathing. I glanced at the black liquid trickling down his leg, forming a puddle on the floor and not daring to touch it. Whatever it was, it didn't look anything like the yellow pus that I had expected from an infection. Maya came running to my aid, quickly checking his pulse and breathing. "Oh, he's burning up," Maya said. Suddenly, the train broke loose and we started moving away from the green fields of infectious crystals. Frank joined us with as many supplies as he could carry from the back cars, trying not to leave food or medication behind. "Oh, I can't believe we're moving again," Frank said gleefully as he returned to us, showing little concern for John's current state. Near the front of the train, there was a sleeping car which we cleaned out and put John to rest in. Moving the mountain of a man was a tough challenge on its own, but it was nothing next to the challenge of keeping him alive through sepsis, as the infection spread into his bloodstream. Maya took on the task of watching John, making sure that he drank and fed him his antibiotics while the train moved closer to Gehenna. It would only be a matter of hours until we made it to our final destination, and I had yet to tell the others what that place truly was. While Frank was busy trying to contact the outside world, using one of the few battery packs still working, I approached Maya to tell her the pitiful truth about our journey. I sat down and glimpsed out the window, watching the landscape change as we quickly passed by. The infinite green fields that had taken Philip started to give way to solid rock, gray and continuous, with scanty cracks breaking its perfect surface. Tall structures extended from some of the cracks, looking like red tree stems covered in veins and arteries, pulsating and twitching in response to our passing. At the top, they broke into bubbles filled with swishing black goo, similar to what had oozed from John's wound. Red forests reeking of rotten flesh, growing in density as we kept moving closer to a literal hell. Every now and then, creatures would emerge from the densest parts of the structures, bizarre things vaguely resembling horses, with long bodies and impossibly thin legs stretching at least 15 feet away, and eyes that were pitch black sunken things, far too large for their heads. About a dozen of them had gotten an inkling to our presence and galloped elegantly along our moving train, keeping up the pace. Maya, I have to tell you something, I said carefully. She didn't respond. She just kept staring at the creatures that were following us. They never got too close, probably curious as to what and who we were. We're not going to make it, are we? She said without a hint of emotion in her voice. What do you mean? Gehenna, I know the name. It means hell, she continued. The red forest outside kept getting denser, forcing the creatures to break off, and as the trees grew taller, the sky darkened. I'm sorry, I should have told you earlier. I didn't want us to give up, she said. I kept my mouth shut. She had been struggling with the same information as me, yet she kept helping us. It wouldn't make sense for me to confess that I already knew as well. I'm sorry about Philip, I said after a minute of silence. Thanks. He would have wanted us to keep fighting. I checked the watch, only to notice the seconds tick slower than normal. According to the time, we were only an hour away from Gehenna. But with every watch having slowed down, there was no way of telling how far away we really were. So what do we do? I asked. When we get there? I nodded. I don't know, but right now we have to. She was cut off by John, starting to shake violently, screaming in agony without fully regaining consciousness. At first, it looked like a seizure, but once we saw his leg, we realized it wasn't anything that could possibly be explained by modern medicine. His leg had torn open completely, and black tendrils stretched out, wriggling around in the air as if searching for something. The obsidian black appendages looked exactly like the flesh of the sentinels, and it immediately dawned on both of us that the sentinel had deliberately let John live after spreading itself within him. We both screamed in shock, unable to decide whether to leave John behind or flee, or to stay and try to save him. Frank came rushing in just in time to see one of the tendrils shoot out from the leg and try to grab me, but I ducked beneath it just in time. What the? We have to cut off his leg, Maya yelled in panic. Frank, get the knife and something hard. How are we going to? I tried to ask with a trembling voice. We'll cut through the flesh with the knife and try to break the bone, but I... Before we could even start to plan out the amputation, John shot to his legs, partially waking up from the pain, realizing what was going on. Get away from me. He groaned as one of the tendrils shot out at us, ripping flesh away as it extended from his wound. I pulled Maya with me out from the compartment, and we fled forward into the next car, just as Frank came running back with an axe that he had found. Where's John? He asked. We didn't need to answer the question because John quickly followed us, walking with his mangled, sentinel-infested leg. One of the tendrils had grown out from the wound, forming an amorphous black blob on the floor, still attached to John, feeding off his body. His leg had completely shattered and split open, but the infection had spread even further, reaching his abdomen covered in tiny holes occupied by more dark appendages. Amputation was no longer a viable option, so we kept backing away as John screamed in agony, visibly trying to fight against these sentinels' movement inside him. As we got to the space between cars, John unwillingly grabbed onto Maya with his arms. She fought back, but even without the tendrils, John was far stronger than all of us. I can't stop it. Please, use the axe. Frank got ready to hit John, but one of the tendrils swung at it, snatching it away. John kept fighting, turning his head to one of the exits, reaching out for it with all of his remaining willpower. Don't die on me, he said before pulling the handle. The door opened and John let himself fall off the train into the thick mess of red trees and darkness. I held on to Maya as she collapsed to the floor from exhaustion, carefully checking if she had been wounded from John's grip. Frank closed the door that John had fallen out through, and we all stared at each other in silence. John had died to protect us from himself, and with that, an immense feeling of loneliness overwhelmed me. Our best chance of survival was gone. and our next stop will be hell itself. I kept staring at the slowly ticking clock. Based solely on my biological assessment of time, it felt like days had passed, but according to the clock itself, it had been no more than a measly half hour. It was the same with each clock on the train. They simply didn't work together with reality, measuring each minute as a small eternity. With John dead, we felt more vulnerable than ever, and since his death, we hadn't spoken a word. I know we're all on edge, but I think it's time we discuss what we'll do once the train stops again, Frank said. Both Maya and I knew our true destination, but hadn't yet told Frank. Alas, the time had come, and if we stood even the faintest chance of surviving, we had to be able to rely on each other. Frank, we need to tell you something, I said. His eyes narrowed in suspicion at my obviously guilty tone. Tell me what? Our destination, Gehenna, well, I trailed off. Yeah, what about it? It's, Gehenna is hell, Frank. We're all going to hell. Maya burst out, annoyed by my hesitation. We fell silent for a few seconds while Frank processed what we had just told him, and then he suddenly had burst out laughing. Really? Hell, that's the best you could do, he said. I just nodded in response. So you mean to tell me that we're already dead and that our next stop will be the realm of Satan himself? Yeah, I guess. Why is that funny? Well, if you haven't noticed already, 2 of us died. How is it possible if we're already dead? Where's John and Philip then? I mean, he had a point. Our conventional idea of hell required us to be dead already, though it never stated whether you could die twice or what happens upon second death. We're clearly not dead, but that doesn't mean we're not going to a horrific place. Regardless of what you might think, Gehenna means hell, Maya said. The argument went on fruitlessly for a while, Frank never giving in and admitting that we weren't going to reach salvation once the train had stopped. In the meanwhile, I kept staring out the window. The once green fields of killer crystals had long since vanished, and the forest of red pillars had grown so dense that it finally blocked out each ray of light brave enough to attempt to illuminate our path. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought that we were back in the void, but it felt different, far hotter than it had before, even more devoid of hope. Before I got a chance to question the environment, the darkness gave way to a large open space devoid of any life. Just a rocky, flat surface surrounded by infinitely tall cliffs on each side. It was a valley, gray and dull, with little to no light penetrating a layer of thick clouds above. And then the train started to slow down. We're coming to a stop, Maya said as she peeked out through the window. The track ends here. Before long, the train stood still and all the doors opened automatically, signaling for us to get off. There was a sign on the empty platform next to us, written in a language that I couldn't comprehend. I pulled out my crumpled up ticket and compared the text, noticing that some of it matched. Gehenna, I mumbled. So what now? We get off the train and wander the wasteland, or sit here with the last of our supplies waiting for hunger to kill us? Frank asked. We never got the chance to make a decision before the train simply started disintegrating under our feet. First the windows turned to sand, and then the seats rotted away as if hit with 1,000 years of time, and finally the floors started to crack, causing us to plummet into the ground. I groaned in pain as I landed, severely twisting my ankle while the others landed slightly more elegantly. Maya and Frank helped me to my feet as we witnessed the last chunks of the train vanish before our eyes. We climbed off the tracks and onto the platform. It was situated on a bridge, giving us a clear view of our surroundings. It was a city, or at least it used to be one, now nothing more than the ruins of a previously inhabited place. Tall cliffs stood around the city, too steep to be climbed, too massive to allow for such light. We were in the shadows, clueless and lost. I looked around at the worn-down buildings, desperately searching for any kind of life, but there was none to be found. Without any other options, we headed down to the streets and started searching for a way out. The houses were mostly empty, too broken to set foot in without risking total collapse, filled only with crumpled papers written in a language that none of us could understand. Where they had furniture, it was crudely constructed from debris of metal and what could only be bone fragments, but whoever built any of it were nowhere to be seen. "How much food and water do we have left?" Frank asked. "Enough for maybe a day," Maya responded. He sighed in response and we kept walking. I limped behind the other two on my twisted ankle until we eventually reached a large open square surrounded with what looked like temples. Unlike the surrounding city, they were beautifully built in stark contrast to their surroundings. In the middle of the square sat an emaciated figure, a man with white, thin hair and protruding prominent ribs from his starved body. He didn't seem to notice us as we quickly approached him to see if he needed help, but even as we spoke to him, he just sat there, rocking back and forth as he mumbled over and over again in a sickly voice. "I just want to die. Why won't they let me die? I just want to die. Why not? Why?" Maya bent down in front of him and tried to get his attention. His eyes had turned white from cataract, rendering him completely blind, and chunks of flesh were missing from his chest and abdomen, visibly infected and smelling like rot. She reached out and checked his pulse, quickly retracting her hand. "He's dead." "What do you mean dead? He's clearly living, talking and everything," Frank said. "Look at him. Nobody could have survived those wounds, and he doesn't have a pulse," Maya said. Of course she was right. The man should have been dead, yet there he sat, crying in agony and begging for a death that never came. Suffering, blind and deaf, without anything to connect him to the world that he lived in. "What do we do?" I asked. I think maybe we should finish him off," Frank said meekly. "We can't, he's..." Maya stopped mid-sentence, realizing that for once, Frank was right. "I'm sorry, I think I've got to agree with Frank on this. He wants to die, the least that we can do is free him," I said as kindly as I could. Frank pulled John's knife out from the backpack and looked at us for the go-ahead. I nodded in return. "You guys better look away," Frank said. He bent down behind the suffering man and whispered that he was sorry, before quickly slitting his throat. To all of our surprises, not a drop of blood poured out from the newly formed wound. Instead, the man just fell to the ground and gargled incomprehensibly. A whole minute passed and then another, yet the man refused to die. The city wouldn't let him, and rather than freeing him, we had just put him into a whole other level of misery, taking away his voice and the ability to beg for death. I didn't," Frank stuttered as he realized what he had done. And with that, as if a veil had been lifted from our blind eyes, we finally saw the empty city for what it truly was. Rather than the desolate ruins that we had met as we entered, we saw a fully populated city, filled to the brim with suffering inhabitants, each mutilated in various degrees. Most of them were blind, with their eyes either ripped out or turned to coal. Those unfortunate enough to see had their limbs removed, or their organs torn out onto the street, unable to do anything to end their miserable existence. As the horrific realization hit us, the ground below us started to move. The city had finally noticed our unwelcome presence and it reacted violently by pulling itself apart, creating a gaping chasm in the middle of the square that swallowed anyone unlucky enough to be in the way. "What's happening?" Frank asked in a panic. "I don't know, but let's get out of here," I yelled in response. The chasm quickly widened, revealing a massive hole extending down into the dark abyss, with spikes and black tendrils extending from the burning walls beneath us. With my sprained ankle, I couldn't keep up with the others, and I slipped to the ground as it shook violently. "Thomas!" Maya yelled as she rushed to my aid, Frank continuing to flee towards the alleys. She pulled me up just in time to avoid being swallowed by the ground. We headed after Frank, who had started running down one of the alleys, seemingly devoid of any people. As he entered the alley, the concrete walls started moving vigorously. "Frank, wait!" I yelled, but he didn't hear me. By the time he noticed the walls, it was already too late, and hundreds of spikes shot out from them, morphing out from the concrete buildings. Frank dodged the first one as he tried to retreat back towards us, and for a moment it seemed that he was in the clear, before one final spike emerged and penetrated straight through Frank's abdomen. With the mortal wound, the wall fell silent. Frank collapsed to the ground, holding onto his guts, unable to scream from the intense pain. "Frank!" we yelled together as we rushed to his mangled body. He lay there in shock, his eyes darting frantically back and forth between us. Too wounded to move, he didn't even realize the severity of his injury. Maya tried her best to stop the bleeding by applying pressure, but it hardly slowed down the incessant flow of crimson blood. I'm okay, I'll be alright," Frank kept repeating in panic, getting quieter with each iteration. He quickly bled out, too fast to accept his ultimate demise, and all we could do was sit over him as he let out his final breath and finally fell silent. The ground started moving again, not to attack us, but to swallow Frank, to fuse his limp body with the concrete beneath him. Within seconds, he had vanished, and he became one with the city of Gehenna. Before we could get the chance to catch our breaths, the wall started moving once again. With my injured leg, I knew that I stood no chance of escape, but Maya didn't have to die with me. "Maya, get out of here!" I yelled as spikes formed around us, reaching out to destroy our vulnerable bodies. And then out of nowhere, a dark rumble sounded alongside a bright light, and the ground came to a standstill. An old man emerged from up the alley wearing a worn-out but perfectly tailored suit and a cane in his left hand. The sound shook us, and I grabbed my ear futilely trying to block it out, but it barely helped. "What the hell are you kids doing here?" the man said as both Maya and I passed out. I slowly opened my eyes, momentarily forgetting that I had literally spent the past couple of weeks in hell. The old man that had saved us stood by the window, staring out at the empty street, mumbling in a language that I couldn't understand. "Good morning," he said without even turning, somehow noticing my awakening. With a throat like sandpaper, I couldn't even respond. I looked around the room with my tired eyes, quickly realizing that Maya was missing. "Maya, where is she?" I forced out, barely a whisper. "Don't worry about her, Thomas. She's resting in the chamber as the infection fades," he said matter-of-factly. I pushed myself up into a sitting position, noticing a glass filled with a murky brown liquid on the bedside table. "Infection?" I asked as I inspected the glass. "It's the closest translation that I could come up with. Everyone touched by the void slowly starts to drain, their souls wearing out as they merge with this place." He turned and limped towards me, revealing a mangled leg kept up by his cane made from bone and a bright green crystal, exactly like the ones from the fields that we had passed. "Everyone except for you, Thomas," he said. "What does it even mean?" I asked. Before the man could answer, a loud brief scream could be heard from one of the other rooms, one sealed by a heavy metal door, similar to the one on the locomotive. "What was that?" Without an answer, he limped over and touched the door with his cane. It morphed into an opening which he walked through, and then it promptly closed itself off. A few minutes passed and I got back on my feet, stumbling over to the door, unable to open it. I pushed my ear against it in an attempt at listening to the other side, but as soon as I touched it, the hole returned, and the old man walked through it, shortly followed by a drowsy Maya. "Tom!" she exclaimed in joy as she embraced me in a tight hug. The three of us sat down around a table made from concrete and bone. "You must have a lot of questions, and though we're short on time, I'll answer as much as I can," he said. Maya and I looked at each other, both wondering where to start. "Who are you?" I asked. "Well, that's a tough one," he said as he scratched his head. "I'm what you could call a guardian, and my job is to keep this place locked down. preventing any unfortunate souls from accidentally slipping through dimensions and ending up for the rest of eternity here. Before that, before my time, I don't know who or what I was. I believe I used to be a human, but it has been so long that any memory before this place has long since been wiped out. He paused and looked at the untouched glass on the bedside table. "Drink it," he said as he looked at me. Without questioning him, I drank the liquid out of some strange compulsion. It tasted like piss, but it immediately revitalized me, as if I had returned back home and recovered from the ordeals in hell. "How did we get here then?" Maya asked. The man looked at the floor with a shameful expression on his face. "It's my fault. For millennia, I've kept this place safe, but even I have aged, and eventually I will perish like all things should. And the people that are already here, like the one that Maya trailed off. They came during the time between the last guardian and myself, when there was nothing here to keep the gates between our worlds closed. Those who meet an untimely death or narrowly avoid, unable to process or accept it, they all come here. I tried to help the ones that were already trapped, but they were far too gone. Not like you two. Not like us. No, you still have a chance at escape, but we have to move quickly." With that, the man shot out from his car and started gathering a bunch of papers, filled to the brim with drawings and hardly intelligible text in a strange language. "Take these," he said as he put the bag of papers in my hand. We left the house and carefully ventured into the dark streets, with the sky so riddled with thick clouds that even if the sun existed, it couldn't possibly brighten up the ruins of Gehenna. The street was mostly empty, just a few suffering and lost souls wandering, curious to our sudden presence. Though they started to follow us, they kept a safe distance. "Don't pay them any attention. They won't bother us until we get closer to the light," the man said. He guided our way through the twisting and turning streets, eventually giving way to a vast barren field riddled with the mutilated bodies of the lost souls. Without hesitating, the man started walking into the piles of dead, faster than the both of us despite his mangled leg. Ahead of us, miles and miles in the distance, lay massive cliffs stretching straight up into the sky, obscured at the top by the storm clouds. And then as we touched the cold ground with our feet, a dim light appeared by the base of the cliffs, shooting through the air. "What's that?" I asked. "Your way out. It's a cave that serves as a doorway between our worlds. I've tried to close it, but I'm too weak. Now it will at least serve some purpose." As we passed the dead, some of them awoke, albeit too weak to rise. They stared us down, shrieking unintelligible words of agony. The guardian tapped the ground with his cane and the crystal facing down, and then Dad fell silent once more. He fell to his knee as he lifted the cane, unable to support himself without its help. "What happened to your leg?" I finally worked up the courage to ask. "Oh, it's a recent injury, caused by these sentinels, as you call them. They're usually confined to their void, kept at bay by my mere presence in this world. But recently they've been getting braver. I guess they know that my time is up." "What will happen without you?" Maya asked. "The Sentinels will take over Gehenna, rule it as they used to millennia ago, and the gates will open, allowing any unfortunate soul to fall through the gaps of reality. Unless someone takes your place," I asked. He nodded. I looked over at Maya, who had finally realized the same as myself, that one of us had to stay behind and become the next guardian. "Tom," Maya said as she looked at me with pleading eyes. I turned towards her, but before I could respond, the ground below us started moving. I looked down to see that the barren fields had given way to an infinite pile of corpses, all rapidly waking up by our presence. Some just starting to scream while others were aware enough to grab for us. The guardian pointed his cane at them again, and while some fell silent, he wasn't strong enough to keep them all at bay. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. There was no way that we could reach the cave with the lost souls awakening, and the guardian knew it. Without a word, he slammed the cane to the ground, falling down with it. An impossibly strong light penetrated the air, instantly silencing the dead. As he saved our lives, his skin started to crack and burn with the vast amounts of energy surging through him. "Run for the cave," the man demanded as he collapsed to the ground, rapidly falling apart. I rushed to help him, but he was surrounded by an invisible barrier, making it impossible for us to reach him. "No, leave me," he groaned. We looked at him in despair as the light started to fade and the dead started to awaken once more. He had bought us a few minutes, but time was quickly running out. "Do as I say and run." I grabbed Maya and pulled her with me, and we spurted for the cave only a few hundred feet away. The movement of thousands, if not millions, of lost souls moved the ground enough to cause cracks that shot towards the cave, ripping rocks from the wall. The cave started collapsing, and we dove through just in time to avoid being smashed to pieces by the falling rocks, one hitting Maya on her shoulder and tearing through her flesh. "Are you all right?" I asked as I helped her to her feet. "Yeah, the wound isn't too deep, I'll be fine." We turned towards the light that filled the cave. It was a frame of glowing fog surrounding a pitch-black portal, hanging a few feet above the ground. "That's it?" I asked. "I guess so, it doesn't exactly look inviting, but there's nothing else around." Even the ground within the cave was riddled with the bodies of the dead, and with each second that we spent there, they started to awaken. "We have to hurry, Maya, you go first," I said as I walked closer to the portal. She didn't follow. She just stood back and stared at the swirling darkness hanging in front of us. "I'm not going with you," she said quietly. "What?" "You heard him, Tom. This place needs a guardian. If we both leave, millions will suffer. I just can't do it." Maya was far too good of a person, unwilling to consider her own well-being over that of others, and I knew that in my heart that nothing I could say would change her mind. She walked up to hug me, a final goodbye before we parted ways for the rest of eternity. I held her tight as I whispered into her ear, "I'm sorry. Sorry about..." Without letting her finish the sentence, I grabbed onto her, swung her around, and shoved her into the portal. The second she realized what was happening, it was already too late, and her body washed away in the darkness, giving me a final look of sadness before she vanished. Gehenna needed a guardian, and Maya wouldn't have let me stay behind. So without any other choice, knowing that she had a much brighter future back on Earth than myself, I made that decision for her. One moment of betrayal to give her a chance at a good life, even if it meant myself staying behind for the rest of time, it would be worth it. After Maya vanished, I felt at peace. Something within me knew that she had made it home, and with that I gained a whole new awareness of the place that I would call home. The papers given to me by the old man, once filled with an incomprehensible language, suddenly turned into instructions for me to follow, and that's when I knew that the place had chosen me long before I had even entered Gehenna. I was supposed to stay behind. My job now will be to close every gap between this world and Earth, meaning that after this message, nobody will ever hear from me again. Tell my family I never suffered, and Maya, if you ever read this, I'm sorry. I hope you live a great life. I was doing yard work yesterday evening when I noticed a loose patch of dirt in the nearby woods behind my family's house. I dug for a bit until I discovered a buried iPhone. Once I powered it up and connected it to the Wi-Fi, it downloaded several backup files of recordings from an iCloud account. I have begun transcribing those recordings below. Recording 1, May 25th, 2019, at 10:31 a.m. A young man, later identified as Ryan. Well, my second year of college flew by. Once again, I overcommitted a bit and ended up having to back out of a few obligations. But I'm glad I stuck it out with the Cavalier Daily. They needed the help, and the reporting I did for them led me to attend all sorts of interesting events. It's remarkable how much goes on in an average week on campus that most of the university doesn't pay any attention to. Normally, only seniors get selected as editors. They get significant control over content, as well as a small salary. Melissa told me if I wanted to stand a chance at getting an editor position as a junior, I would need to return in the fall with something to show for it. "Write something about Roanoke," she said. "We get new students from your area every year. Most people here hardly know anything about it. So, what can I write about my small town that will interest people on a campus 2 hours away?" I suppose I could churn out a multi-page description of how it gets regularly mistaken for the other Roanoke, the one that colonists disappeared from in North Carolina. But I'm sure there's a better subject out there. I'll have to come up with an idea soon if I'm going to have time to produce something good. Whatever I do, I'll record my progress and any interviews on my phone like I'm doing now, and I can transcribe it all when I've gathered enough material. Recording 2, May 29th at 11:30 p.m. Ryan. I have a lead. I went on a run by River's Edge this evening. When I came upon the abandoned railroad tracks by the bridge over the Roanoke River, I remembered those stories I grew up hearing. The stories differed in the details, but they all involved a ghostly train traveling through the city on a derelict Norfolk Southern line. I did a little research. As it turns out, phantom train legends are quite common. Trains are still in regular use throughout the country, but they were obviously a much more common form of passenger transportation in the past than they are now. Nowhere more so than in a formerly prominent rail hub like Roanoke. People who mourned a loved one may imagine their ghost rising out of a grave. It's not too different from how, in the minds of those who miss the era they represent, long-retired steam locomotives passed over miles of abandoned, moss-covered tracks. The legends differ, though, as to the train's destinations. Most of the time, the witnesses simply relate seeing a train pass mysteriously in the night in an area where the tracks are no longer in use, and that'll be the end of the story. On the rare occasion that one of these trains stops, some of the witnesses will go on board to investigate. It's a common story for the witness to see a loved one step off or be ushered off for not having a ticket, and learn the next day that the person they saw had died during the night. The implication being that the train ride consisted of their soul passing on into the next life. Other tales involve a train stuck in time, reenacting a famous event, like the doomed souls heading into Nashville on every anniversary of the Great Train Wreck of 1918. Or a mourning train forever bringing the body of the assassinated President Lincoln to grieving citizens between Washington, D.C. and Springfield, Illinois. What's remarkable, though, is that despite the dozens of renditions of the local legend I heard growing up in Roanoke, I can't find any mention of our own phantom train story online today. I've gone through the obvious search engines as well as multiple social media pages dedicated to local history. Nowhere have I found even a murmur about the subject. I sense that there's a story here, a folktale waiting to be gathered. These tales have existed orally throughout the region for decades, at least, and they are waiting for someone to write them up formally. That someone will be me, and this will make for a great article when I return. One that condenses rumors into a coherent piece while also touching on Roanoke's past and present as a railroad town. Unrelatedly, I met a sweet girl while working at the Grand Inn. Jennifer is a year older than me and lives in Raleigh Court. When we finished our shifts, she joined me in the back of the theater to catch the second half of Brightburn. It wasn't quite a date, but I did agree to hang out with her and a few of her friends next weekend. Something tells me it's an audition for her friend's approval. If I do well enough, maybe I'll get a date with her after that. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Recording 3, June 3rd, 2019 at 9:55 a.m. Ryan. I am currently approaching the Roanoke City Historical Society to ask you a few questions about local ghost train lore. Depending on the response that I get, I may or may not bring up that I'm making an audio recording of all this, as I'm technically not obligated to mention it. Okay, here I am. Excuse me, sir. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about local history? Of course. It's nice to see a young person take an interest in the subject. What can I help you with? I have questions about trains. One train in particular. My name's Ryan, by the way. You can call me Eric. And that's a subject I know plenty about. What do you want to know? Well, you see, I grew up hearing stories about a ghost train. Let me stop you right there. Did you really come here to talk to me about ghost trains? It's not that I think they're real, don't get me wrong. I'm not crazy or anything. It's just that I'm trying to write about these stories themselves, what they consist of and how they evolved. You see, as a kid, You heard a story that spooked you, right? The thing is, most people outgrow their childhood fears and move on with their lives. I suggest you do the same. So, you don't know any stories about a ghost train in the area? I know that there are no rumors, no legends, nothing. If anything like that existed, I would know about it. Do yourself a favor by finding something else to write about. Now, if there's nothing else I can do for you, I would like to get on with my day, and I would like you to leave. Recording for June 3rd, 2019 at 10:45 a.m. Right this way. Mr. Thompson, you have a visitor. Do come in, take a seat. We don't get too many reporters coming around the train museum these days. You with the Times? No, I'm just writing for a college paper. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about local history. That's quite a model you've got on your desk. Yes. I'm building an exact replica of one of the old trains. Class A number 1218. I'm painting the pilot right now. Pilot? I thought it was an engineer who operated the train, and a conductor who ran it and called the shots. No, son. The pilot isn't the person. It's this V-shaped structure here, underneath the circular front of the smoke box. It's for knocking away anything in the train's path. Do you know what they called it in the old days? No. A cow catcher. I assume you can guess why. Now, even the dumbest cow was bright enough to try to get out of the way of a moving train. But sometimes they would get stuck in the tracks. Now, what in particular are you wondering about? I'm looking into folktales, urban legends, that kind of thing. Urban legends involving trains, right? Well, one train in particular. The ghost train that I grew up hearing about. Nancy, escort this young man out of my office now. Nancy! I just have a couple questions. Now listen to me, boy, and listen closely. Don't go around asking about any ghost trains. Whatever you think you know, forget about it before the people you know forget about you. Recording 5, June 3rd, 2019 at 3:15 p.m. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you mind if I ask your daughter something? What about? Does your daughter attend the school down the street? I know she would be on summer break now, but I'm asking about during the school year. Yeah, she does. Well, you see, I graduated from there. Finished 5th grade in 2009. I'm doing a report on a subject that I first learned about when I was a student there. I'm wondering if it's still taught the same way. Do you mind if I ask your daughter a couple of questions? Samantha, will you answer a few questions for this young man? Yeah. Thank you, Samantha. Can you tell me what grade you're in? Well, I just finished the 2nd grade, and in August I'll be a 3rd grader. And how old are you? 9. Wow, 9. That's great. I remember being 9. That was a long time ago. I'm all grown up now. Samantha, have you learned anything about trains in your classes? Yeah, trains used to be everywhere here. I got to ride one at the zoo. Ah yes, the zoo chew. I remember riding that at your age. Now, let me ask you, have you learned anything about ghost trains? Huh? Now, young man, what is this about? Samantha, when I was your age, my teacher told us that there was a train from many, many years ago that would still pass through town every now and then at night. It would appear long after bedtime, and nobody knew where it came from or where it was going. Have you learned about this? That's quite enough. Can't you see that you're scaring her? I'm just trying to do some research. Next time you want to talk about ghosts with a 9-year-old, ask a parent's permission in advance. I'm sorry, Mom, I thought ghosts weren't real. Oh, they aren't, dear. But he says his teachers told him that they were. Well, he's wrong. No teacher would ever say that, because teachers don't say things that aren't true. Goodbye, sir. Recording 6, June 3rd, 2019 at 6:11 p.m. By the way, I'm going to record this, Ariel. Why would you do that? Because we're talking about the train legend, and I'm trying to record every conversation I have on that subject. Shouldn't you be getting back to your yard work? Shouldn't you be offering to help? Dad always makes me do it alone. Just because I'm your older brother doesn't mean I should have to do all the chores on my own. It's not that you're my older brother. It's that Mom and Dad aren't charging you any rent. It's only fair for you to help out around here. It's not like you pay any rent either. I don't have to. It doesn't count because I'm still in high school. Oh, whatever, Ariel. Look, I want you to tell me what you remember about the train legend like we talked about earlier. The whole thing. Well, Mrs. Pendleton talked about it a little bit in 2nd grade history. According to her, it started with a different ghost train. Mrs. Pendleton said that her grandfather had worked on the line that heads east to Lynchburg. According to her grandfather, on one dark, rainy night, his own train's engineer, John Kilpatrick, had to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting something. Another train that had appeared before them. It was older than any train in operation should be, and it moved at a slow speed. Mrs. Pendleton said that her grandfather's train managed to stop itself just in time to avoid hitting the other train. Kilpatrick and Mrs. Pendleton's grandfather reported what they had seen, but no one took them seriously, as no other train should have been on the line at that time. Mrs. Pendleton's grandfather only saw the vague outline of the second train. Kilpatrick, though, was much closer and claimed to have seen men and women on board. They were dressed formally, the way people dressed when they traveled a long time ago. Kilpatrick remembered the blank looks on their faces. They were oblivious to all that was around them. Once Kilpatrick got his own train moving again, neither he nor Mrs. Pendleton's grandfather saw any trace of the second train again. Kilpatrick did some research after that. He learned that in 1889, there had been an accident near the exact location where they had spotted the second train. A heavy storm had disrupted the tracks, causing a passenger train to crash. Nearly 20 people died and many more were hurt. Mrs. Pendleton's grandfather truly believed he had seen a ghost train. It spooked him, but he moved on with his life. Kilpatrick, though, was never the same. He spent years obsessing over it, particularly the way he had seen so many people unknowingly heading to their own deaths. On the locomotives Kilpatrick helped operate, the other crew members claimed that Kilpatrick constantly peered outside, as if he was wondering he would catch sight of the ill-fated train again. He told them that he wanted to warn its passengers about what was going to happen and somehow stop the disaster from occurring in the first place. The legend we were taught was that this ghostly encounter made Kilpatrick go mad. He raved constantly of lost spirits wandering in the night. After 3 more instances of him bringing a train to a stop unnecessarily, allegedly to avoid hitting an obstacle that, upon further investigation, was found to not actually exist, he lost his job. He didn't take it well. Only a few days went by before he threw himself in front of the same train he had spent his career operating. Soon after, these sightings began. Every few months, someone would report seeing a train traveling in areas where one should not be present. Mrs. Pendleton's grandfather saw it once, and he swears that John Kilpatrick was operating it from the locomotive cab. Kilpatrick searches for lost souls like the ghost passengers he saw during his own life, stopping when he sees any to let them on board to join him in perpetual purgatory. Or at least, that's how the legend goes. How did I do? Great, you did just great. It's a quality story, isn't it? I suppose. It's odd, you know. So far, nobody else I've talked to knows anything about it. I don't think teachers bring it up anymore. It's like the town has collective amnesia. I think we were one of the last classes to learn about it. The state probably just updated the curriculum and removed wacky ghost stories from the list. I don't get why even the man I talked to at the Historical Society didn't seem to know about it. The legend is a major part of our town history, and I can't write about it if the only other source of information is my sister's memory from grade school. Well, aren't you hanging out with some friends this weekend? Maybe you can ask them what they know. I've got an even better idea. Recording 7, June 7th, 2019 at 10:15 p.m. I'm present tonight with an esteemed group of local residents, Jennifer, Alice, and Trevor. The former is the star employee of the Grandin Theater, and the latter two I just met tonight. Alice: hello, future Ryan. How's transcribing all these recordings going? Let me guess, it's lots of fun, and you're having no doubts that your ghost train article was a great use for your summer. Trevor: how much farther do we have to go? We're practically there. Just follow me off the pavement to the tracks. That'll lead us to where we need to go. How long have these train tracks been out of use? Everything's covered by grass, Jennifer said. 30, 40 years probably. I can't believe I let you talk us into this. It's like we agreed. I brought a handle of vodka, and in return, you guys agreed to come out with me to the site of Kilpatrick's death, so I can do another set of interviews on location. Heck, with all the recordings I'm making, maybe I'll create a podcast instead of a written article. Aren't you the only one of us who isn't 21? It's funny how you're the one contributing the liquor. I suppose it is. Come along, just a little further. These tracks will lead us to the outskirts of the cemetery. That's a convenient place for him to end it, isn't it? They probably didn't have to take him far to bury him, Alice said. Is the cemetery that old? Jennifer asked. I think that it is. Anyway, we made it. This is where he jumped in front of the train. Yep, if you look here, there's a tiny historical marker by the side of the tracks. Here died John Kilpatrick of Salem, Virginia, following over 25 years of distinguished service as an engineer. It doesn't even mention the death. It's an unpleasant subject. So did any of you hear about this guy, or the legend surrounding him growing up? Yeah, I learned about it. My grandfather told me that he sold his soul to the devil, and that he travels around in a bright red train that transports the sinful to hell, Alice mentioned. What? I had never heard that. Plus, everyone I talked to said it was a black train, just like the ones he had operated during life. Yeah, I heard the devil thing too, but not that the train was red. My uncle told me that the train is supposed to have a green glow. He never saw it, but he swears that he heard it whistle. How did your uncle know the whistle came from Kilpatrick's train? He didn't know for sure, but he was out late one night when he saw billowing smoke coming from the woods. He was worried it was a fire, so he ran over to it to investigate. When he got there, he found only overgrown tracks that had long been out of use, like where we're standing now. But in the distance, he heard a steam train whistling pattern. 2 long, 1 short, and 1 long blast. He had no doubt a train had just been here, and given the poor condition of the tracks, it wasn't a train from our reality. Any real train would have instantly derailed. I learned a little about it in school. The teacher didn't tell us anything about a deal with the devil, or about it being red or green. What she said more or less matches what Ryan's been telling us. She did mention that people could sometimes hear it whistling in the night. Just as Jennifer finished, a light whistling sound could be heard. Do you all hear that? Hear what? Ryan's just messing with us. Yeah, I gotcha. But what do we say we sit here for a moment and just listen? I don't know about that. In school, I was shown some PSA video about people being run over after lying down on a track they wrongly thought was out of use. I think we're safe. I'll turn this thing off and we can enjoy the moment while looking out for any spooky ghost trains. And for Trevor's sake, I'll watch out for any real trains as well. Trevor, stop hogging the joint, Alice said. Recording 8, June 7th, 2019 at 11:01 p.m. If I see you here again after hours, I'm calling the authorities, an old man said. Calm down, mister. We're not causing any trouble. You're trespassing on park grounds after dark, and I may be old, but I haven't lost my sense of smell. I know what you're up to. Now scram. All right, we're going. Is that geezer holding a shotgun? Can we walk faster? I want to get out of here fast. I do think it was a shotgun. He came from the graveyard of all places, just to shoo us away. The trail's just ahead. We can get out of the park in no time. Y'all didn't leave the weed, did you? Of course not. I've got what's left on me. I'll edit out that part of the recording. You're still recording. I turned it back on a moment ago. I'm glad our potential guest gave you some good material for your podcast debut. It's not like that. I was just creating some evidence in case he shot at us. There's the parking lot up ahead. It's only a short walk back to my place from here. A high-pitched sound repeats in the distance. What the heck? It's just like... It can't be. The sound. 2 long, 1 short, 1 long. Maybe that's a common pattern. There are real trains around here, you know. At this time of night, I don't think so. And no, there are no tracks that are currently in use that go through this area. None that I know of. Let's just get out of here. Recording 9, June 11th, 2019 at 11:58 a.m. I'm currently driving towards the home of Mrs. Pendleton, who taught both me and my sister at Crystal Spring Elementary. A couple teachers mentioned the ghost train rumors, but she was the only one who really expanded on them. I sensed that she knew more than she let on. There may be some details that were too scary to share with second graders, and maybe she'll even have an explanation regarding why these students aren't taught about it anymore. Oh, nice. I just got a text message from Jennifer. Are you free tonight? This sounds like the one-on-one date that I've been hoping for. Somehow, her friends seem to have vouched for me even after my plan resulted in an old man chasing us out of the park with a firearm. She held my hand when we returned from taking the trash out at the end of our shift at the theater Monday night, and we kissed before driving home. I can't wait to see her again this evening. Well, here I am. Out of respect for Mrs. Pendleton, I'm going to turn this off until she agrees to let me record an interview. Recording 10, June 11th, 2019 at 12:15 p.m. Alright, I just turned it on. Can you please state your name and how long you've lived in the area? Mary Pendleton. I've been here my whole life. And what's your connection to me? I had the delightful experience of teaching you in 2nd grade, and a few years later, I taught your little sister as well. Which one of us was more trouble? You both had your moments when you got on my nerves, but overall, you were lovely children. I'm not about to pick favorites between you two. I never do that with my kids. I still remember a lot about what you taught me about local history. For example, Roanoke's original name, Big Lick, and its early growth as a train hub. Well, I'm glad my lessons stuck with you over all these years. They really did. There was one in particular I haven't forgotten. You told me in my sister's class about John Kilpatrick's ghost train. Mrs. Pendleton, do you still teach that story today? And if not, why did you stop? Don't do this. Don't do what? Don't bring it back. Bring what back? My classes kept getting smaller. I didn't know why. I'd start the year with a layout to accommodate the students who I would be teaching. I would tell students about the legend. We would arrange field trips to the site. Cub Scouts would do campouts nearby. At the end of the year, there would be a whole table of empty seats. How is that possible? I've kept asking myself. Why are there empty seats now, but not before? I don't follow you. Did some students go missing? That's just it. I figured some students had gone away, transferred, or, like you said, gone missing. But I checked my files, and there was no record of additional students anywhere. The students still in my class, you, your sister, others, were the only ones listed. And it's not like I remembered any other students, or anyone else did either. I don't remember anyone disappearing from my class. No, you wouldn't. No one does. Ryan, how many students were in your class? I don't know. I think there were just over 40 in my whole grade. That's what the records reflect. But every year, I arranged the room on the assumption that there were close to 50 in the grade, 16 or 17 in each class. But as the year went on, suddenly one student is sitting at an otherwise empty table. But how is that possible? We got a directive a few years after I taught your sister never to mention the Kilpatrick train again. I resisted at first, as I enjoyed sharing the story due to my own grandfather's role in it. But the school board was firm, so I changed my lessons accordingly. Suddenly, my classes started with the same number of students that they ended with. So, are you suggesting that knowledge of the train caused people to disappear? But how did nobody even remember them? I used to have nightmares too. They were terrible, Ryan. They were so terrible. But when I stopped teaching the lessons, the nightmares stopped. Were the nightmares related to the train? Oh, Ryan, I haven't thought about them in years. Why are you making me remember them? Mrs. Pendleton, I didn't mean to upset you. I've seen it, Ryan. I've seen it in my dreams. I've woken up outside in the cold air. I didn't know how I got there, but I knew where I was going. I was going to it. To the train? It's no train, Ryan. That's the thing. It was a train once, but now... Mrs. Pendleton, are you okay? Do you need me to call an ambulance? It was once black iron. It was once black iron. What's going on in here? What have you done with my wife? I don't know. I was just asking her a few questions. Turn that thing off before I... Recording 11, June 12th, 2019 at 8:45 a.m. Ryan here. It's Wednesday morning. I've got the day off work. This recording may sound a bit like an audio diary at first, but it is relevant to the article. I'm currently driving home from Jennifer's apartment. Yeah, you heard that right. It's been an eventful last 24 hours with some downs but also some ups. Let me recap. First, I managed for the third time this summer to start an interview that ended with me being thrown out of a building. If you had the old man with the shotgun, it's the fourth time I've been driven away from somewhere by force lately. So, I don't exactly feel like Mr. Popular these days. On the bright side, my date with Jennifer was everything I had hoped for. We only made it 10 minutes into the rom-com we were watching together before we started making out. And then, I guess I'm the only one who will ever listen to this, but I'll spare the details all the same. Hopefully Ariel won't be too awkward about things when I get home. Heck, maybe she'll high-five me. She's the one who keeps saying that I need a girlfriend after all. Is that what Jennifer and I are now? I may have that conversation with her the next time we're alone together. Or maybe I should wait a little longer. She knows I have to return to school at the end of the summer. Maybe I shouldn't even address that subject at all. Anyway, now for the gloomier stuff. I think my conversation with Mrs. Pendleton got to me. It sure escalated quickly. 1 minute, she was as composed as ever. The next, she was sweating, crying, and bright red in the face. By the time I left, she had her head down and was yelling in anguish. I somehow feel responsible for what happened to her, but I can't be right. I'm concerned that she has some buried mental condition that I triggered. But how could I have known that bringing up the legend of the ghost train would do that? Her emotional disintegration struck at my subconscious. That's my working theory, at least, for the terrible dream I had last night. I was standing at the site of Kilpatrick's death, but it wasn't located amidst dense woods like it is now. Instead, it was by a proper train platform. It was early morning, and the sun had yet to rise. Several people stood with me, presumably waiting for the train to arrive. In the distance, an eerie green glow approached through thick fog. A sickening feeling took hold of me. I knew that I didn't want to be on the platform when the source of the glow arrived. I wanted to leave. But when I tried to go, the other people grabbed me and held me in place. So I waited helplessly. As the locomotive emerged from the gloom, it looked different from what I expected. It was a murky, black-red hue, and its iron structure was deformed and misshapen. The upper half of a face, its skin stretched and strained, covered the front of the engine's smoke box. The screeching of the train's brakes emerged as a scream from a gaping mouth that extended across the pilot. I felt weightless, and then slowly realized that I was in pain. Jennifer woke me from where I had fallen. I had sleepwalked away from the couch where I had drifted off with her out the door, and to the staircase that led from her floor to her building's lobby level. I had stumbled down at least several stairs and landed on the hard floor. Luckily, I emerged from it with only a few minor bruises. Jennifer gave me some weird looks. I don't blame her. I've told her that I have sleepwalked a few times before, and that it usually happened when I was in a new place. In truth, I've never done something like this before in my life. It freaked me out. But it was a good lie and it did the trick. Jennifer calmed down. I held her the rest of the night as she went back to sleep. I lay wide awake, however, as my mind fixated on the grotesque image from my dream. I couldn't shake the sensation that the train wasn't some figment of my imagination, but it was out there calling for me and drawing me nearer. Recording 12, June 12th, 2019 at 11:12 a.m. Mrs. Trout, it's me, Ryan. Do you remember me? I waited for the school bus in your front yard every morning for 10 years. No. Well, Mrs. Trout, I live next door. Leave me alone. Can't an old woman step outside without being harassed? Look, Mrs. Trout, I was just wondering if you could answer a question of mine. You knew a lot of the people who worked on the old railroads, and I was wondering if you heard any stories from them about the Kilpatrick ghost train. You cut that out right now, you hear me? I was just wondering. No more of that crap. No more, I tell you. Next thing you know, you're gonna rope me, or someone you care about, into what's coming to you. Drop this now, if you care about the people around you. Recording 13, June 12th, 2019 at 1:08 p.m. A baby can be heard crying in the background. Isabel, dear, please quiet down. If you need to take care of your baby, I can wait, or I can come back later. Oh, don't worry. Isabel will get over it. What do you want to ask me about? About some local legends. Am I correct that your grandfather worked on the railroads? Yeah, that's right. Granddad loved telling me stories about his decades as a conductor. Did he know John Kilpatrick? The baby continues crying. Hush already, Isabel. Dear Lord, what's wrong with her? I really can wait if you need some time with Isabel. Shut up, Isabel. Maybe another time. I think I'll be going. Not so fast, I heard your question. I just needed a moment to process it. Isabel, shut up already. Miss, I think Isabel. You're here about the ghost train, aren't you? You want to bring those nightmares back. No, I don't know what you're talking about. You're with him, aren't you? Trying to fetch me to bring me to it. Well, I'm not going. I'm not letting you invade my mind again either. Ma'am, what are you doing with that knife? God! God! The baby continues crying. Recording 14, June 12th, 2019 at 4:50 p.m. This is Ryan. The police have finally let me go. Early this afternoon, Margaret Potter ended herself, twisted a long kitchen knife across her neck. I'm lucky the police believed my story. There was blood all over my face when they arrived. Poor Isabel is in the care of her uncle now. I need to let this go. I was stubborn and ignored all the signs. Who needs a stupid journal position a year early anyway? Some things are best left buried. Recording 15, June 13th, 2019 at 6:46 p.m. I want to go back to the night before last when I went to sleep next to Jennifer on the couch, before the first nightmare. It's hard to count how many nightmares there have been now. 2 in dreams and more in reality. When I got home, I walked past my concerned sister and parents and went straight to the bathroom, where I stripped and showered and scrubbed every drop of Margaret Potter's blood off my body. I thought I was clean, but when I opened the shower curtain, the reflection in the mirror for a moment displayed the stretched face of detached skin that covered the front of the train of my dreams, and blood oozed down from its eyes. I grabbed a towel and I hurried out of the room. I locked the door to my room, dried myself off, and buried myself in sheets. I heard knocks and yelled that I would be fine in the morning, but that I needed to rest. I slept, but I didn't rest. I found myself back at the platform. In my hand were 2 tickets. The first said, "Single ride, 11:59 p.m., 6/13/2019. It was still the 12th at the time. It meant that I had until tonight before I left. The second said, "Round trip, 11:59 p.m., 6/14/2019. A pale man waiting to my left saw me examining it. He had a top hat and a thick mustache. "I see you've got yourself a round trip in 2 nights, he said. "The funny thing about a circle is that it never ends." The train approached through the thick fog. It whistled 4 times. Long, long, short, long. Its outline slowly moved closer. Its screech throbbed through my head. To my right, images from my memories unfolded. I watched Jennifer take my hand behind the theater. I watched our kiss and the smiles that followed. I watched us hike out with our friends, flee the man with the shotgun, cuddle up on our couch, and spend the night that followed together. I tried to move to ask them for help, but my feet were frozen in place as the train came to a stop. A thick layer of fog obscured all but the green glow that surrounded it, and the demented face that covered the front of the locomotive. "This ride's not for you," said the pale man. "Not all of you, at least." He politely tipped his cap and approached the train. He disappeared into the mist. I remained immobilized as I watched an image of myself and Jennifer, their hands clasped together, cross from my memories onto the platform, where they followed the pale man's path until the dense gray vapor consumed them. "All aboard!" yelled a voice. I heard the thuds of shutting doors, followed by the train starting up again. I awoke at the edge of the park. It took me nearly an hour to make it back to my house. I found the window to my bedroom wide open. How could I have done all of this while asleep? It wasn't possible. When I crawled back in bed, it was at nearly 4 a.m. I awoke only a few minutes before my shift began. I threw on some clothes and headed to the theater. All I wanted was to be with Jennifer again. I could tell her about all I had been through once the morning set of screenings began and the crowd died down. She would hug me and support me, and I would feel better. Instead, when I arrived, she gave me nothing more than a half-hearted smile as she ran the popcorn machine. When business died down, I asked her if she was okay. She shrugged and said she thought that she was fine. "Jennifer," I told her, "I don't know what's going on with me. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It made me really happy to be with you the other night." A sour expression spread over her face. She told me she didn't know what I was talking about. After a few minutes, I realized that she had no memory of us going on a date, me taking her out to the park with her friends, or even us holding hands and kissing behind the theater. She told me to see a doctor and then proceeded to avoid me. Something tells me this isn't simply ghosting me, as it's typically called. She seemed so serious, so genuine in her conviction, that none of what I told her really happened. But I approve. I have my recordings, including the recordings of her when we went out to the park. I wish I had thought of that at the time, but I suppose the terrifying dreams, the sleepwalking, and Miss Potter's death had shook me up too much already to think rationally. Jennifer forgetting about the time we spent together was just too much. I abandoned my shift, stormed out of work, and went home. My boss has called me 3 times, but I haven't answered. I'm all out of ideas. Something terrible is happening to me and I don't know what to do. Should I go back to Jennifer? Should I leave town? I can't shake the feeling that if I don't find a way to stop what's happening to me, my disappearances will end up a part of the local folklore. The phone contains several more recordings. My next post will contain transcriptions of the rest of them. Recording 16, June 13th, 2019 at 9:04 p.m. I don't deserve a sister as caring as Ariel. She could tell that I was upset and insisted on spending time with me to make me feel better. She didn't pry when I told her that I didn't want to talk. I don't want to drag her into this any more than I have already. The same goes for anyone else I've interviewed over the last few weeks. I started to relax after we turned on the television. For a few minutes, I managed to not think of the ticket or the sense of impending doom I had felt about whatever will happen at 11:59 p.m. tonight. Toward the end of the show we were watching, the images started to scramble. When I complained about it, Ariel looked at me blankly. She flipped the channel to some competition show. Contestants sang on a stage. At first, the stage was clear, but as the show progressed, crimson puddles formed in it. The puddles grew in size and depth until the contestants, who took no notice, waded in knee-deep pools as they performed. "Is this some kind of Halloween-themed special?" I asked, even as I realized how little sense that made. "Huh?" said Ariel. The liquid kept rising as the image cut to a host who was judging the contest. Blood poured rapidly from the elongated eyes and stretched mouth of his massive and deformed face, feeding the red pool that now flooded the set. I freaked out. Ariel tried to call me and asked me if I needed to go to the hospital. When I looked back at the television, it displayed nothing other than a mundane singing show with no deformed faces or contestants caked in blood. I told her that I needed to go, and sprang to my car. There's no point in trying to calm myself anymore. Something's happening to me and I need to take action. I'm driving as I record this. I don't have much of a plan, only a hunch. There's one person I can think of who may have answers. If my instincts are correct, he may be the only one who can help me. Recording 17, June 13th, 2019 at 9:55 p.m. A loud car horn can be heard behind me. A train whistles in front of me. "What's your problem?" The beeping continues. "I can't go now. There's a train passing ahead, for Christ's sake." "Christ got nothing to do with what's coming for you. A baptism of blood's heading your way. Your rebirth won't be as a child of God." The heck is wrong with this guy? Finally, the train's going through. I'm going to pull over and let this guy pass me. A baptism of blood is coming your way. Screw off. Recording 18, June 13th, 2019, at 10:25 p.m. "Hey, I know you're in there." "Come on in," the man says, opening the door. "Look, sir, I'm so sorry to bother you, it's just... You've been seeing it in your dreams, haven't you? And you've got a train ticket for tonight." "Yeah, how did you..." "I've seen it before. Too many times. The name's Charles, by the way. Say cheese." "Gosh, what was that for? I can't see anything." "You'll be fine in a moment. I know the flash of my old camera is a bit harsh. Look, I have so many questions. Sit down and relax a bit. I'll make some tea. It's hard to relax when I have about an hour and a half, right?" "Right." "I see you eyeing my shotgun. Don't worry, I don't even own any shells, it's just for show. It scared the hell out of me and my friends the other night. I thought you might have been one of them, but I wasn't sure. My eyesight isn't what it used to be." "What's it like living on cemetery grounds? Surely you're not required to be here." "My family's cared for this graveyard since it was first established. The city gave us the deed for this patch of land within it. We could have given up on it ages ago, but we've always preferred to live on the property we care for. It also helps me with another duty, one that concerns you. I had a feeling you knew something about this, about Kilpatrick's phantom train. It was just a hunch, but I had no other leads. You weren't just chasing me and my friends away because we were out late in the park, were you? No. My house overlooks the site of Kilpatrick's death. His train, phantom train as you call it, stops there. And kids like you chasing after ghost stories will often be there for him to pick up. It happened much more in the past than it does these days, but I still keep a lookout. If it weren't for me, you'd be there in that train at this very moment, and you wouldn't be getting off anytime soon. You said it used to happen more in the past. Why is that? Kilpatrick's phantom train had a hold in this city for decades. Eventually, it left a mark so black that it was impossible not to notice. I led an effort to stop teaching about it, stop talking about it, stop sharing information about it. Dozens and dozens of people used to go missing. That number is much smaller now. I haven't seen records of that many missing persons. You wouldn't have. Kilpatrick's train doesn't just lure victims from this world into the next. It takes the memories of the victims with it. It sucks everything out of this world about them. Even, gradually, every physical record of each victim's existence. Let me show you something. Do you need help with that? No, I got it. And the box isn't heavy. Here we go. Now tell me, what do you see inside? There's hundreds of scraps of paper. Most are newspaper articles. This one is about a missing scout troop. Disappeared from River's Edge in 1968. There are dozens of photos in here too. Taken from your camera, I assume. Then here's one more to add to the collection. I should have asked you to smile. Why are you putting my photo in there? Nobody's gonna remember you otherwise. If this train erases everyone's memories of those who go on board, and even erases all records about them, then how do you still have everything in this box? I can't explain the science of it to you. If science is even a thing that matters here. But I can tell you that the process is gradual. It can be combated. I cherish this box. I go through it every morning and every night. That hampers the erasure, at least for a while. It once had even more pictures and articles. I used to know every name in here, but by looking through it every day, I can keep some memory of these people alive. It may not do the victims any good, but it's something and I think it matters. The water can be heard boiling in the background. I'll let that steep for a minute. You see, I didn't always live here alone. The train got to my son. I recite everything I know about him every morning and every evening. I tell myself that maybe my memories tether him to the realm of the living. Maybe it will give him strength to escape from purgatory. But the train's power is strong. A few weeks ago, I realized that I didn't know his name anymore. All I have now is this picture. I'm so sorry. It's taken from you, hasn't it? Yeah, I had been dating a girl. In my dream, the two of us got on board. And now it's like she barely knows me. What about you? Has it appeared in your dreams like it has in mine? For a while, I'd see it. The train would always be obscured by something, like fog or a tree line. But I would sense it approaching when I waited at a platform, and I would wake up with it closer to me every night. One day, I drove 5 hours south and went to sleep in a hotel in North Carolina. When I woke up, I was in grass in the park not 3 yards from the site of Kilpatrick's death. I called the hotel and my car was still in the lot. I don't know how it was possible. I don't think you can run away from it. Eventually, I taught myself to have dreamless sleep. It kept it at bay, and over time I think it lost interest in me. Can you help me? I can go a few days without sleeping. Maybe I can learn the same thing you learned. Maybe. I can try to help you. I don't know if you can learn it that fast, but we can fight it together. I can't believe I got myself into all this trouble. All for a stupid article. Article? Yeah, I've talked to people all over town about the train. You're the first one to give me some answers. I see. I think the tea's ready. And let me add some milk to it. It's terrifying to me that it erases people from existence. Your poor son. Here you go. It has a funny taste. Don't worry. It's just a strong flavor. How do you think Kilpatrick chooses whose dreams to haunt? Lots of people who used to know about the legend haven't disappeared. He goes after those who come to him, in dreams and in reality. Sometimes that slowly devours an entire family, using these spirits of the first member to go missing, to lure the others to it. I'm feeling weak, dizzy. Several minutes pass without speaking. Crickets and scraping can be heard. Hey, Charles, what happened? Why are we on the old track? I hoped I could help you, but reporters don't keep secrets. I doubt it'll come after anyone just for reading something posted about it online, but the curious will come here to investigate for themselves. For their sakes, I can't let you go. Wait, I've already decided to stop. I've canceled the whole project, and I'm going to erase every recording I made. Please, untie me. I'm sorry, but you have a train to catch. Recording 19, June 14th, 2019 at 7:08 a.m. I don't know where to begin. I need to recount what I've been through. I don't know what good it'll do, since I'm convinced that I need to erase every recording I made. But I'm going to spell it out anyway. I'm going to complete my research. I lost consciousness after Charles left me by the tracks. I awoke to find Mrs. Pendleton, of all people, undoing my bindings. She explained that she didn't know how she ended up here. You were given a ticket, weren't you? I asked. In your dream. Round trip. Her face looked pale. Let's get out of here. But it was too late. Figures surrounded and subdued us. You have a train to catch, young man, said the pale man from my dreams. Fog descended. Phosphorescent green approached from the distance. A whistle bellowed 4 times. I want to leave. Let me go, cried Mrs. Pendleton. A tear ran down my cheeks as I realized that I was responsible for her fate. The face emerged. A familiar, chilling scream howled out of its elongated mouth as the train slowed. The mist faded after it stopped. It was once a black iron, but it wasn't anymore. It was a blood train. Its structure consisted of largely human skin, flesh, and organs. Bones formed its pistons, valves, and coupling rods. Hundreds of skulls lined its walls. The pale man turned to me. I shuddered. His long face was gone. Behind his dangling tongue and beneath his veiny eyes dripped blood and mucus from where his nose and mouth should have been. I understood where his features had gone when he pointed to the stretched skin that covered the front of the train engine. He and the others dragged me and Mrs. Pendleton to an entrance to a train car. My heart beat rapidly. No, 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 muttered my old teacher. I wanted so badly not to see what was behind the door. All at once it swung open. A cascade of blood cascaded upon us. Mrs. Pendleton screamed. I probably did the same. We would have been swept away but for the others holding us in place. There was so much of it and it just kept pouring. It felt like the whole world had turned into a sea of red. Finally, the wave receded. The pale man pushed me and Mrs. Pendleton inside. Pulsating pink tissue lined the inner walls and ceiling. As we plodded through puddles of red, I noticed that the room contained seats, like it had once been a passenger car. Upon closer inspection, I realized that these seats were made of portions of rib cages melded together. Bits of flesh clung to the bones, one set of which connected to a torn neck and battered head that faintly pulsated and breathed. We crossed from this car to the next, moving towards the engine. To my surprise, the next car was dry and well kept. The blood that dripped off me stained the white carpet as I walked, but the dozens of resigned, empty-looking passengers sitting around me did not seem to care. A uniformed man approached and asked for my ticket. At first, I was too dazed to respond. "Your ticket," he repeated. "No ticket," I said. Maybe he would throw me off. The man sighed and removed a pad of paper. He flipped through it before reading from it. "Ryan Grove, a single ride. You may sit anywhere in this car. Make sure to get off at the next stop." He left me alone after that. The train started up. I examined the other passenger. 6 children in scout uniforms sat together. A woman in a pinner apron and a mob cap sat with a man in an old military uniform. Many of the passengers were missing limbs or chunks of their bodies. The door to our compartment from the next car opened, revealing a figure obscured by shadow. "New arrivals, this way." I froze. The other passengers slowly turned their faces toward me. I sensed anger at my hesitation. "Now," said the shadowy figure. We followed him until we reached the locomotive. The figure stayed just out of sight, but I discerned that he wore a thick coat, gloves, and a dirty cap. "Do you see how it fades?" he asked, motioning to a long gap in the metallic structure of the car's ceiling. With surprising deftness, he reached out a tattered arm that consisted mostly of discolored, exposed bone. He grabbed Mrs. Pendleton and tore a portion of her side of her chest off with his bare hand. She screamed and collapsed as he smoothed her detached flesh over the gap. A green glow emanated from wherever the flesh met the train's metal. The flesh hardened and settled into place as it joined the train structure. "That's enough from you for today," said the man. He turned to me while Mrs. Pendleton whimpered. You're him, aren't you?" I stuttered. "What do you want with me?" He didn't acknowledge me at first. Instead, faded memories flashed before me as translucent images of my infancy, my home, my family, my friends. With a flick of Kilpatrick's wrist, each image floated into the boiler, which lit up. The train accelerated as my memories powered it like coal once did. "I don't want to be here," I said. "There is a way out," said Kilpatrick. "I want you to think something over. I'll let you go and return all that I've taken. If you publish the article, there are so many repairs that need to be done after all." "No," I said. "If that's what you decide, then I'll see you tomorrow night," responded Kilpatrick. "We'll have so long to get to know each other." I woke up at my house. I was sweaty and dirty, and everything about my room was off. It was empty. No clothes and no pictures. Nothing but the bed I lay in. I checked my pockets. My wallet was gone. I still had my phone on its last bit of power, and the ticket for my dream. Round trip, 11:59 p.m., 6/14/2019. Tonight. I remembered what the pale man said. The funny thing about a circle is that it never ends. I stepped into the hallway. My family's house felt foreign. Ariel, Mom and Dad smiled together in pictures on the wall. I didn't belong there anymore. I'm in the backyard now, As soon as I finish this recording, I'm deleting everything on my phone and burying it in the woods. Hopefully, it'll disappear soon, just like everything else I once owned. Just like I will tonight. All that will remain of me soon will be a photo and Charlie's shoebox. It's probably best that way. I'm more than a little tempted to publish the article, but I made up my mind. Should I just end myself before tonight? I don't think so. Something tells me that if I do, Kilpatrick will get my soul anyway. Maybe someday this will all stop. Maybe enough people will forget about the legend that Kilpatrick's train and all those trapped on board will fade away. Mom, Dad, Ariel, our life together was real. Even if I suspect that you're going to forget that it ever happened, I love you all and I always will. The recordings end here. What's described in them, it can't be real, can it? I look now at the empty room in our house, the one that's always been there. I never thought about it much, but why did we never do anything with it? It was my name and my voice in that recording. I don't want to believe that any of this is true, but I have a strong feeling that it is. I wonder about what to do. About whether I should visit old man Charles at the cemetery. About whether I should try to rescue this brother I may have once had. I wonder too if I should do nothing. That's what this Ryan would have wanted. Maybe, like he suggests, the legend will die out on its own if people stop looking into it. I may not have the option of forgetting about it though. I woke up this morning sprawled on the damp earth of a trail in the woods near my house. I'd had a terrible dream of an old train. It stopped in front of me, and I peered through the thick fog surrounding it, until I identified a young man with my mother's face and my father's green eyes, waving at me with a maimed hand through a half-open window.